Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the Astrology of October 2022. I hope that you're doing well out there today. I see some wonderful faces stopping in the chat. We're going to go on a journey today, as we always do on the monthly forecasts. I've got a number of lunations to talk about with you today, plenty of ingresses, planets moving into new signs, a whole mess of solar phases and relationships with the sun. We've got some out of bounds things to talk about today, including the moon and Mars. And then we also have a really interesting Hellenistic void of course moon this month that is worth spending some time discussing the difference between that and modern interpretations of the void of course moon. So I hope that you're all doing well out there. Just welcoming some nice friends here today. We've got Dimphy stopping in from the Netherlands. Hello, Dimphy. Rachel is here from rainy Virginia, sending owl energy. Oh, cool. I enjoy owl energy. Alley Cat is here from California. Hello, Alley Cat. Remco is stopping in on a lovely autumn day in the Netherlands as well. Susanna is here from Finland. Hello, Susanna. And yes, we're all enjoying Venus's newly return to her home domicile of Libra. So that hopefully that is helping everyone kind of relax a little bit, or maybe have their get along pants on slightly a little bit better. I'm just going to start pulling some cards out here today to demonstrate some of the astrology that we're going to be experiencing. I feel like this is the point in the show where I'm like Mr. Rogers, like taking off my sweater and putting on my shoes and like, maybe I need to sing a little song for you today. Won't you be my neighbor? Like something like that. It's too bad I don't have a little trolley around me with little puppets that would talk to me during this, but all of you will have to be that for me today. Okay, a few more friends stopping in. Azur is here from France, who shared a nice story that mentioned me in French the other day. They had to go to Google Translate to understand, but cheers to you, friend. Lynn is stopping in from Vermont. Tarja is here, stopping in briefly before class in Finland. Raven is stopping in from Kansas. We got a number of really lovely faces here from our guided group study that we started on Monday, which is really exciting. We have a really awesome group. We have about 16 people signed up for that, and just some really knowledgeable folks, a lot of familiar faces from the chat, and we're already starting to get some really good questions on Demetra George's Ancient Astrology and Theory and Practice Volume 2. I'm really just super excited to dive into that because Demetra is one of my favorite astrologers of all time. And there's just so much to learn and so many nuances that can help bring us to a new understanding, if you will. So, let's dive into it. A few more people stepping in. Sheila is here from Vermont. Cherry is here from Chico, California. Fionn is joining us, I believe, from Ireland. So all sorts of lovely folks stopping in today. I'm so happy that you're willing to share your day and your afternoon with me. And so let's kind of give you the overview. We are, of course, in Libra season. Welcome to Libra season. If you're just waking up from your nap, I feel like I've been waking up from a lot of naps lately. As soon as Libra season hit, as a Leo ascendant, my chart ruler is the sun, and the sun is in its fall. So there is kind of a, I don't know, it feels like the vitality just kind of got drained out of me, and all I want to do is go to bed at 8:30 at night and just like, take naps in the middle of the afternoon. It's really interesting to see how the astrology is playing out like that. It's always a really good indication of your personal energy is what is the ruler of your first house doing? What kind of condition is it in? That can really give you a lot of insight into how much energy you might have in a specific season. So for those of you Taurus risings and Libra risings, you're probably feeling a little bit better now because Venus is in a lot better condition than it was in the past month or so, with Venus being in Virgo, which is its fall. Okay, so let's kind of talk about our lunations, because we have a couple of really big lunations this month. We do have a first quarter moon on the 2nd of October. And that's going to be, well, let me back up for a second. This is Mercury retrograde here. First of all, let's get some business things out of the way before we dive into all the details. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. Please hit the like button. Please sign up for the newsletter. There's a Libra Decans sale that's going on. You can get 20% off my Libra webinar on the Decans of Libra, tarot, fixed stars, astrology, just a whole really thorough examination of Libra. That you can find that on the store link at my website, spencermichaud.com. I also recently had an interesting guest on. If you didn't see that, Achyuta Bhavadas was on the show last week for the new moon in Libra 1, although he made a very interesting announcement that he is now going by his birth name again, Adam Ellenbos. So if you're a little confused about that, he is now Adam Ellenbos once again. But regardless, he's an amazing person, whatever you want to call him, and he was a great guest. So please check out that new moon in Libra 1 as well from Nightlight Astrology. Really, really great teacher, and I owe him a lot as far as my astrology knowledge and just a good person in general. So check those things out. If you're feeling challenged in this period of time, I am a practicing consulting astrologer as well, and I love doing readings for all of you. So reach out for a reading if you want to see what the transits have in store with you, or if you want your natal chart examined. Okay, so I think that's the business stuff. The last little business thing is, if you want to support the work I'm doing here today, there's a little $ in the chat. It's called a super chat or a super sticker, and that contributes to keeping the lights on, purchasing new books, keeping me afloat with snacks and whatnot. I've got a nice shake today to keep my blood sugar up, and I really appreciate that. And if you're listening to this after the fact, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. All right, friends. So those are kind of the professional things that we've got to get out of the way here. And so let's get back into the astrology here. So big picture thoughts. Four lunations that are important. I like to look at the quarter moons and the new and the full moons. There are other, parts of the moon that might resonate with you, but to me, those are the kind of the signposts. Those are the markers that are directing us in a certain way. So we've got a first quarter moon at 9 degrees of Capricorn on the 2nd of October, a full moon on October the 9th at 16 degrees of Aries, which is in opposition. So the first quarter are the squares. At the 17th of October, we have the last quarter moon at 24 degrees of Cancer. So we have an interesting interaction with the moon being in its own domicile and the sun being in its fall. So we'll talk about that. And then on the 25th of October, we have a pretty big illumination with the new moon solar eclipse at 2 degrees of Scorpio. That's going to be conjoining Venus and the South Node. So Venus is going to be newly ingressed into Scorpio in its exile. So there's going to be some funky things potentially with that eclipse. Mars will be stationing retrograde shortly after that as well. So we will try to break it down as well as we can. Ingresses. Ingresses is a fancy word for a planet moving into a new sign, but it really is important to track those because it really shifts the focus of what topics are going to be on your mind, what type of energy a planet is going to be utilizing, both as a sculptor in the sign itself and as clay providing for other signs or other planets and other signs. So we have Mercury moving out of their exaltation and domicile in Virgo and into Libra again on the 10th of October. Venus will move out of her domicile and into her exile on the 23rd of October. The 23rd is kind of a big day. It's like pre-eclipse, but we have a lot of different ingresses. We've got a direct station of Saturn on the 23rd as well. So we've got Venus moving into Scorpio that day, the sun moving into Scorpio as well, moving out of its fall, so gaining a little bit of dignity. And then we have Jupiter retrograding back into Pisces on the 28th of this month. And then at the last few days of the month, on the 29th, Mercury will be moving out of Libra and into Scorpio. Those are our ingresses. Solar phases. These are important. These are when planets make an important relationship to the sun. So when they're either going into the heart of the sun, under the beams of the sun, coming out of the beams of the sun. This is all about visibility, right? When a planet is visible, sometimes we can see its significations playing out in our life rather than those things being behind the scenes. And then we have like the directional shifts, stationing retrograde or stationing direct. So these are what I call solar phases, or what astrologers call solar phases. On the 2nd, we have Mercury stationing direct at 24 degrees of Virgo, and also making its heliacal morning rise, which means it becomes visible as a morning star again. So those things usually happen fairly in conjunction with one another. On the 8th of October, Pluto will be stationing direct at 26 degrees of Capricorn. So we'll, those outer planet direct stations and retrogrades, that happens once a year, and we may be able to feel that on some macro level, but I think we feel it slightly less personally than if it was an inner planet like Mercury or Venus or whatnot. The 16th of October, Mercury is going to move under the sun's beams again at 8 degrees of Libra, which is called its morning set. So it's going to be moving a lot faster when it goes under the beams this time, and it's going under the beams at 8 degrees of Libra, which is conjoined a fixed star called Diadem. And we've talked a lot about Diadem on this show, where Diadem was a fixed star that had to do with a queen that had to cut off her hair and sacrifice her hair to Aphrodite for the safe return of her husband from war. So making a sacrifice for the family or sacrifice for her community, humbling ourselves in some way. So there may be something related to that around that period of time. On the 22nd of October, Venus makes its cazimi in the final degrees of Libra at 29 degrees of Libra, which means it conjoins with the sun and becomes renewed in the heart of the sun. That should be really interesting, a really powerful degree for Venus. So really trying to maintain our balance and equilibrium around that period of time. And then on the 23rd, Saturn stations direct at 18 degrees of Aquarius. I'm actually looking forward to this quite a bit. Saturn's my time lord. So hopefully the feelings of responsibility and being able to move forward with creating positive structures in our life will start to unravel. And then the biggest news of the month is Mars is stationing retrograde at 25 degrees of Gemini on the 30th, like on kind of Halloween Eve there, right? All Hallows Eve. And it's going to be retrograde for quite some time. And it's going to be in Gemini for a number of months. So when we get to the end of the month, we'll break that down in depth, but I think that's one of the things to really be on your radar this month. Out of bounds planets, the moon is going to be out of bounds from the 1st to the 4th, the 13th to the 18th. Mars is going to be out of bounds from the 23rd to May 5th, 2023. So this is craziness. I'm a little nervous about that. 100% honesty. I'm a little nervous about Mars being out of bounds, and we'll try to break that down and see if we can find the silver linings within it potentially. And then the moon again will be out of bounds from the 27th of October till November the 1st. Now the VOC that I was talking about, the Hellenistic void, of course, which I will break down in depth in a second, is from October the 5th to October the 7th. And that's a really unique condition of the moon, where it's not making any aspects for 30 degrees, and that counts across sign boundaries according to the Hellenistic doctrine. There's different doctrines that say it's 30 degrees until it changes signs. That is more of a medieval way of looking at it. There's a modern version of this. The modern version makes the moon VOC like every few days, and I haven't necessarily found that to be the case, but I definitely feel these Hellenistic VOCs. I went back and looked at my journals and what was going on these days. The last one I remember, I tried to record something, and everything on my computer just said, nope, nothing's going to come of this. It just completely fried out. My whole computer overheated, and I lost everything, and I had to completely redo it when the void, of course, was over. We had a void, of course, like a year or two ago when Chadwick Boseman passed away. And I just remember the feelings that were going around that event. It was very emotional. I think there was a lot of sadness going around, and it was hard to get some things done because he was such an inspirational figure for a lot of folks. So just keep that on your radar. Doesn't mean that you can't do anything. It just, it might be a time to relax. I know I'm taking next week off. Might do some traveling, might not. We'll see. See what happens. Okay, so that's kind of the overview for the month as far as the details. And we will go even further in depth as we look at the chart. I'm going to take a look at the chat because you all are blowing the chat up, which I love. This is awesome. So many wonderful comments. Raven says, yes, happy Venus Day. Just picked up a beautiful autumn bouquet on my morning hike. Feeling the domicile of Venus today. Awesome. Yeah, I've been seeing some really nice pictures of some autumn flowers and leaves. I believe Susanna has been making these really beautiful mandalas that like these flower patterns on her Instagram that I've been appreciating. Yes. Alley Cat says, hopefully Venus joining the party helps for you. Yes, I hope it helps for me too. I think it will. I think it'll help my moon, I hope, which is in Taurus. Raven is saying, yes, Taurus rising, loving this Venus, I'm sure. Yes, Tarya says, my chart ruler is never retrograde. No, that's true. So that's good, right? I guess, but it has its own challenges. I will say I'm very seasonal. Libra season isn't always my favorite season, mostly because of the condition of the sun. And there's always something challenging that happens around this time period where I'm having to adjust to others' energy. And as a Leo rising and a Taurus moon, I kind of like to do my own thing most of the time. And when you have to make adjustments and compromise, it's not always my super favorite thing in the world. So, but there's learning things from it, right? It's just part of the season, isn't it? Oz Jeweler says 100% recommend booking a reading with Spencer. Yay! I thank you, Oz Jeweler. Yeah, we had a really nice reading, you and I, and always love working with all of you out there. And trust me, I prepare for those readings as much as I prepare for these live streams. I have 5 pages of notes today. Always want to be more prepared than less. Susanna also is recommending getting a reading. Thank you, Susanna. I appreciate you, friends. Katie is here from Portland, at work, so can't interact with the chat, but I'll be listening. That's okay, Katie. I'm glad you're here with us and giving you a shout out. Yes, get more. Thank you for the nice comments, everyone, on the readings that you've gotten. I know there's a lot of people in the chat who have gotten readings in the past, and it's really nice getting to know all of you on that level as well. Stephen, the Jupiterian, is here. Hello, my expansive friend. Hopefully you'll bringing us peace and order from San Francisco, California. DMV says, I would love to support you, Spencer. Over here, things have changed dramatically thanks to Putin. Energy bill tripling starting next month. Inflation 17%. So buy purchasing power. I'm sorry, Dimphy. I know that we are definitely going through a challenging time globally right now, with inflation, with the threat of war or actual war, with the specter of nuclear threats. I hate to, acknowledge the elephant in the room, but it's a really interesting, challenging time, and I hope that we can find peace within it, because it is. It's tough, and I my heart goes out to you, Dimphy, being much closer over there. Although, if things escalate over there, it's going to affect everyone, and it is affecting everyone. So, I do think it is worth paying attention to and praying for peace and praying for cooler heads to prevail and putting our energy towards unity, harmony, and peace. I do think it matters. I do think that not falling complete victim to our fears and our despair is really important during this time. We do have to be realistic and we have to be prepared. And I think that's really important. It's important to be sober in these periods of time. But I do think that I believe in the power of prayer and I believe in the power of positive intent. I think it can really, inner peace can bring a lot of outer peace on some level. And we'll talk about that as we get further into the Libra story here. Spirit Throw Me a Bone Live is here. That's a great name. Hello from Northern Virginia. Okay. Good comments, everyone. All right, I'm just looking through the chat, see if there's any questions here. When does the void of course start? Yeah, we will. It starts at 6:45 p.m. Eastern time on the 5th of October and goes through 10:40 p.m. Eastern on the 7th of October. And I'll talk about that in depth when we go into the little details here. Cookerzilla is here. Yay. Thank you for being here, friend. Remco is joining me in the Saturn Time Lord like train, right? It should be interesting. Cookerzilla says, I'm wondering how you think Mars, Saturn, and Neptune is going to help us make it through October. Well, I don't know if they're going to help us make it through anything. I think they're going to require us to rely on our characters and our ability to make adjustments to get through the challenges that they present us. I do think that it's interesting, just talking on a more macrocosm level, that once Saturn turns direct, Mars turns retrograde, it's kind of like a handing over of our will over to our mature boundary setting, learning to live within our limitations. And I think that we're going to see more limitations come with Saturn turning direct. You just have to respect Saturn for what it actually is. And really what Saturn is it's showing us the physical and intellectual limits and boundaries of this earthly experience. And if we come to terms with that and we accept that, we can work with Saturn's energy much more positively. I think that Saturn can give us a long-term and long-range view. I think it can help us to hover above our lives objectively and see how our actions affect our entire community rather than just our personal wants and desires. And I think when it stations direct, we're going to, especially in Aquarius, it's preferred home. It is all of those issues, all of those communal, altruistic responsibility type of challenges are going to become that much more important. So whatever Mars retrograde is bringing us, whatever power outage on some level, and maybe a literal power outage, but willpower outage, whatever, I don't know. I guess the word I get with Mars retrograde is it becomes a little bit more unpredictable, our martial energy, especially when it goes out of bounds. So whatever challenges that brings us, we're going to have to just be sober. We're going to have to tap into our higher, most mature, grandfatherly, grandmotherly selves and endure. I think there's an endurance quality that we're going to have to come to terms with. So I think that's the main thing. And that Mars retrograde is going to be squaring Neptune. So if you're asking me about the relationship of Mars and Neptune, I think that our actions could be a little confusing. It could be, we might not know what to do right away. I think there's going to be circumstances that come up as we get closer to election season in the United States, as we stare down the brink of war in Europe and an energy crisis and climate change. We may be a little bit confused about what the right thing to do is. And I think we may have to live into the answers a little bit. So I think slowing down and kind of going with the flow and letting life speak to you rather than dictating your own terms to life is probably the best way to utilize those three planets and what they're going to bring us. I hope that was helpful. Steven says, Saturn needs to get out of my third house, just doing what I can until Saturn moves into Pisces. Pluto moving into my third will be interesting. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I mean, I've been kind of like, yeah, I can't wait for Saturn to get out of my seventh house, but then Pluto just goes right into it. So there's always trade-offs, and it's a different type of energy. There's always some kind of give and take with the sky, and that's okay. Really, it's just a shift of focus. I think there's always going to be some challenging things, and there's always going to be some wonderful things to be grateful for. And those things might change which areas of our life become more pleasant and which ones become more difficult. And we appreciate and lean into the pleasant ones, and we find strength and endurance and patience with the more difficult ones. And it's just change. I think that's the thing to keep in mind with all this. Dimphy says, thanks to this community and the study of astrology, doing yoga and still enjoying nature and life. Excellent. So good self-care things. Jenny Kane is here. All right. Thanks for being here, Jenny. Glad you're able to join us at work today. Lynn says, I'd really like Pluto to get out of Capricorn. I think a lot of people are excited for that. I mean, Pluto's been grinding across my Mercury lately, and my opposing my Mercury and opposing my Sun over the past few years. It's not a super fun experience. You sometimes you lose things. In my case, I lost my mom. Sometimes you gain things. We bought a house. Just your whole identity changes. I think as Pluto has gone through Capricorn, I've really shifted from one career to another, a way of viewing myself to a completely different one. And this is something that Adam talked about on his show with Pluto opposing his Sun recently. Is just it's a transformational energy, especially when it comes to how we see ourselves and how we identify. So that's something to keep in mind with Pluto and how it might be affecting you moving forward. Sheila is here. Hello, Sheila. Good to see you. On a plane to see the Cardinals play the Panthers. All right, go football. Good luck to Green Bay. Need to sign off now. Well, thank you, Sheila, and good luck to the Cardinals. Is that who you're rooting for? Might be interesting. If so, I hope Kyler Murray performs well. I don't have any fantasy players in that game, so I don't have any skin in the game, so I'm completely neutral on that one. But yeah, we had a really interesting game last night with Cincinnati and Miami. A really difficult one to watch because one of the quarterbacks, Tua, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, went down with a really nasty concussion, and it was a really difficult scene. He had a probably what was a head injury a few days prior, but somehow got cleared to play again, and then hit his head again, and was having a really difficult time and had to be wheeled to the hospital. And he was having some interesting challenging aspects in his chart too. The main one was a Mercury Mars square in his chart. He has a fallen Mercury, and Mars was squaring it exactly, which I think speaks to his experience. He did have use of his extremities and was conscious and everything at the hospital. So just sending love and light to him, and I hope that he's okay. And it's a challenging game. Sometimes we have fun, and sometimes it's difficult, and there's drawbacks and positives to all of it, isn't there? Okay, let me see. I love all these questions. Yeah, Lynn is saying it was scary to see Tua. I can't believe he was let back into the last game. I agree, Lynn. If you are any type of football fan, sorry to belabor the point here, but Tua took a nasty hit where he hit the back of his head on the turf last week, Sunday, like 5 days ago. It was a short week for them because they played Thursday night. And he got up and he stumbled around and fell down and somehow was let back into the game. And there's all sorts of there's lawsuits being made by the NFL Players Association, about maybe the Dolphins not doing their due diligence and really shouldn't have let him back on the field for that game in particular, and probably should not have cleared him to play on Thursday. So I think that that's actually a really big deal for the NFL. And I think that they've been really making a focus on head injuries and trying to prevent them. And I do think that this experience with Tua is probably going to lead to some really intense changes in the way that they do things, because it was not a good look for them on national TV. And hopefully the silver lining is that this will lead to some rule changes that will hopefully protect players' safety, because it really is. It can be a very beautiful game. It can be a very violent game. But I think that they're at least making an attempt, I hope, to protect these players so that they can do what they love for a living, and that we can enjoy it on Sundays without feeling guilty that these guys are putting their lives on the line for I mean, they're making millions of dollars, but you know, it's tough to watch. There was definitely a tarnish on that for sure last night. Um, okay, great comments. Let's dive into it, friends. I'm really appreciating all the comments and kind of chatting with all of you. I love these chats. I love the informalness of it. But let's kind of dive into some astrology here. What do you say? I gave you the overview. Let's start looking at the nitty gritty. The first thing I wanted to do, what I like to do actually in these monthlies, is just kind of break down the decans and that the sun is moving through to give us a kind of a canvas that we're going to be painting all these energies on. The first 2 to 3 days of the month, the sun is still going to be in the first decan of Libra, the Two of Swords card energy. And that one is that decan, that energy is a little bit about, I would say that my main theme with it is an awareness, which is related to the Sephira Chokmah, like a flash of insight in the Kabbalistic tree of life, an awareness of the other, an awareness of another's perspective, an awareness of an injustice potentially that could potentially make us feel out of balance, could make us feel angry at first. A lot of times people think of Libra as this peaceful sign, and it is, but there's righteous indignation that comes in the beginning of a Libra's attempts to restore peace. So I think that the beginning of the month and the end of September that we're going through here, we are aware of a situation that is out of whack, that is out of balance, something that doesn't feel really fair. I'll just give you a little example of this. My righteous indignation got ignited yesterday. There is a program that has been proposed by the United States government for student loan forgiveness, and they are talking about forgiving up to $10,000 to $20,000 of student loan debt, and there's all these specific requirements for it. And yesterday it came out that they're going to make the requirements even more difficult, and it would disqualify my particular loans that are privately held because I consolidated them when I was 20 years old into a private company, and they basically bought my debt from the federal government. Now, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. They just told me you could get a really low interest rate for whatever. And now I'm learning that privately held loan might not be eligible for forgiveness as of the 29th of September. So you can imagine my quote unquote righteous indignation be like, that's not fair. Like, why do I have to be punished for being young and stupid while everyone else is getting their loans forgiven? Now, I don't think it's the end of the story, to be honest with you. I think there's going to be other people that are going to be like, well, come on now. That's a technicality. These companies are predatory. We should try to do something about this. But again, that's one example of how an event that doesn't feel fair at first may ignite the daimon, the Uranus, the deities that people prayed to for retribution for a crime that went unpunished. So I think that there's something to think about, that this is only the beginning of the Libra story. That's why when I thought about it, I was like, this isn't the end of this. There's going to be something that is going to rebalance this, and I just need to live into the answer. I almost like made an action that might have put me in an even worse position yesterday, and I said, I got to slow down. I need to get all the facts first and then figure out how to move forward. And I think that's a really good way to deal with the first decan energy of Libra. Get all the facts first. Try to see the other perspective, look at it from multiple angles, and then make a decision as you move forward. So I hope that makes sense as far as what kind of energy we might be experiencing at the beginning of the month. Okay. Yeah, Kate says, it sounds like being young and responsible being held against you. Like, yeah, or irresponsible maybe, right? Yeah, I that's something I've often felt some challenges around. There's a lot of choices that we made that I think that, for my personal opinion on this is just me on my stupid soapbox for a little bit, is that some of our late stage capitalism really, it isn't out to like have your best interests in mind. It's out for profit. And when you're young and inexperienced, you're vulnerable. And I really get frustrated when people prey on people who are young and vulnerable in the name of profit. And that's really frustrating to me. So that's igniting my experience of the Uranese. And maybe I just need to have compassion for my young self or something on some level, but we'll see. And Kate's asking how the study group's going. It's going really well. I'm really enjoying the conversations we're having in our Discord group and the questions that people are asking. And we had a really nice meetup on Monday, and just lovely perspectives, a lot of really great people. And I'm really excited about this book. I think part of the reason I'm doing this is to force myself, to give myself an excuse to really dive into a book. Oftentimes when we're doing our job, which astrology is my job now, we have a few different sources that we pull upon regularly, and it can get a little bit rote. And I have really great sources. I have like 5 to 10 books that I use every single week when I'm doing readings and forecasts. But I'm really excited to give myself the accountability or allow myself to dive into Demetra's work the same way I did before I had a lot of responsibilities with the live stream and with a lot of clients. And in turn, what I love is when I get really excited about something, I want to teach it. I want to share it. And it's my enthusiasm, my hope is contagious. Like I already had a really great question from Lynn, who was in the chat, I think today, that we were looking at the first few chapters, and she brought up a really great question about planets that are aspecting an angle or a planet in an angle from a cadent house. And we had a really nice breakdown with that on how a planet in a cadent house, house 12, 9, 6, or 3, could be stimulating a planet in the angle, even though it is quote unquote weaker in the cadent house. It may be causing the planet or angle to take action. I thought that was really fascinating. We had some really great examples of it, how it would play out practically. And that was all just from the Discord. So it's playing out better than I could hope for right now. And I'll just keep my fingers crossed that once Mars goes retrograde, we'll all continue to treat each other with kindness and grace and fairness. So, I'm excited about it though. So thank you for asking, Kate. And I'm hoping to continue doing this and to do one in the winter. So if you missed out this time around, it's okay. I will have another one that's coming around in January, and we'll go through probably the last third of Demetra's book during that, and maybe another text as well. So keep your eyes peeled for it. Okay. Yeah, and Lynn is talking about another awareness of an injustice, discovering that Vermont still has an article in its constitution that allows slavery and indentured servitude for debt. We'll be voting to change it. Yeah, it's crazy. So that's a great example, Lynn. Really great example. Yeah, so we've got people talking about the shifts from being a classroom teacher to a substitute teacher to full-time astrologer. Yes, Stephen, that's it is. There's a lot of, I guess you could call it your astrological coming out on some level, and a lot of us go through it. And we're doing this kind of work that it's a little bit out of the ordinary, and a lot of our friends and family don't understand it. But finding the community like we have here today is really important, so that we can feel validated. There's really a good validation energy that happens when you find people that will support you. And I hope that we're providing that here and in the study group as well. Okay, so let me see. I lost the chat. Where'd the chat go? There it is. It's hiding. I've got like a million little windows open. I got to find all of them. Okay, friends. So let's talk about this astrology for the Sun in Libra 1. So this is October 1st through the 3rd. Just one thing to point out about the astrology of the first few days is that the moon is going to start off out of bounds, we've always been kind of focusing on this a little bit. And remember, out of bounds planets are outside of the normal path or declination of the sun across the sky. So we have this energy where the sun is rising higher or lower in relation to the ecliptic based on what time of year it is. And the planets generally follow within a similar range of degrees of declination. And when a planet moves outside of that range, it is said to be out of bounds or kind of going rogue. It's not following the normal rules. So it's very interesting. I've been paying attention to the out of bounds moons because our emotions, our bodies may not be following the normal pathways. We need to give ourselves more grace around that period of time to feel our feelings. We might want to stay home a little bit more. We may feel a little bit more tired, or we may go to extremes with our bodies. We may work out like a weekend warrior a little too hard. So it's good to kind of pay attention to these a little bit. And thank you, Fionn, for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. It really fills my heart up with all the wonderful donations that we get here. So pay attention to that. That's going to be happening from the 1st through the 4th. The other thing that's happening on the 1st is that we have Venus making an opposition to Jupiter. So we've had a couple other planets that have gone through this opposition, including Mercury and the Sun recently. And now Venus takes its turn. And again, this axis is really about, compromise versus individual action or individual will or individually inspired action. And Jupiter right now is asking us to review how we assert our independence. While Venus, newly ingressed into Libra, is really trying to bring balance, harmony, equilibrium. It's trying to say, how can you take the other person's perspective into account while also taking your own needs into account? So when you balance the two of those out, you find the Libran equilibrium, right? So that's something to consider with this opposition. Now, they're both benefics. So Venus being a planet that's related to the lunar sect, Venus, I often think of Venus as good fortune that comes to us more randomly. It is of the nature of 2K, the random distribution of fate. And remember that word, because we'll talk about it when we talk about the 3rd decan of Libra and its daimon Nemesis, who is restoring right proportion and trying to rebalance the randomness of 2K, or AKA fortune. So a lot of times Venus asks us to accept things and open up to things, whereas Jupiter is of the solar sect, and it is saying, you have an awareness of what is right, of what is wrong, and here you take action based on that to bring order and peace and teaching and expansion and all of those natures. So it's more about conscious action. So we may be rethinking how we take action in the world, and we're having to take into account how to harmonize our personal growth with the other, whatever that other is. Sometimes the other is a mate. Sometimes the other is a child. Sometimes the other is society. Sometimes the other is the law. So there's all sorts of things that could be coming up regarding that. Okay. Stephen says, I found you through Adam Ellenbass, aka Chuta. Yes. Much of my audience has come through Nightlight Astrology, which is such a blessing. I think I was a huge super fan of Nightlight and took pretty much every class that was offered for the last 2 to 3 years, and I was very vocal in class. And I met a lot of really nice people, and I think that Adam and I are good friends, and we have quite a bit in common. I think temperamentally, we have fundamental differences as well. That I think that are, he's a Taurus rising, I'm a Leo rising. Just think of the differences between those, and you can kind of start to understand. But we're both Cancer suns. We're both roughly born around the same, few year range in the Midwest. So there's definitely, we both like football, although he's a Vikings fan, but I'll forgive him for that. But anyway, It's all in good fun. Okay. Kate says, y'all are my community, have meant the world to me. Thank you and all of you for being here and being you. Well, thank you, Kate. We're so happy that you're here with us and that you're being a part of it. That's one of the reasons I continue to do this. I used to do videos that were more standalone, shorter videos, and I just really like interacting with an audience. It reminds me of being a performer, being a musician, and honestly, I would talk to the audience sometimes more than I would play music, just interacting. I just like that. And I love that as a teacher, as a teacher at a community college and I used to teach adult rec and ed classes. I just love that interaction with the group. Alley Cat says, I don't know why, but whenever the moon is right on top of a fixed star that is off the ecliptic, out of bounds, it always seems to draw my attention. Not sure if this is so close that it is an occultation. Yeah, it is interesting. They're fixed stars. I think that they can be more powerful if they're closer to the ecliptic. I think that there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Bernadette Brady does some things with something called parans, which is a different method about when a planet and a fixed star are on an angle, either simultaneously or on different angles. There's a lot of different ways to interpret the sky and lenses to look through, and I'm constantly fascinated by learning new methods. Susanna says, out of bounds moon only appears in certain signs, Cancer, Gemini, Sagittarius, and Capricorn, and sometimes Scorpio and Taurus. Am I wrong? I know I have out of bounds moon in my natal chart. That's a good question, Susanna, and that is not something I know the answer to. I wasn't aware that it only goes out of bounds in certain signs. So if someone has more information on that, I'd be happy to learn more. There's always something I'm learning as we go. Okay. Spirit Throw Me a Bone says, yes, you were vocal in class. I was impressed by your contributions during the Nightlight course. That's why I booked a reading with you, and it was not a disappointment. You rock, Spencer. Thank you. Spirit, tell me your name again. Sometimes I don't remember who is who. Who are we talking to again here? I'm sorry if I can't remember everyone's avatar. But I'm sure I'll remember once you tell me. Yeah, just throw that in the chat. Azure says, I also use parans. Really interesting approach. Yeah, it is. And there's a lot of astrologers doing good work with that. I'm fascinated with, I use both. I use the heliacal risings or the heliacal rising star that Brady uses. But, like I said, many different lenses. Okay, let's keep going. These are great questions, great comments. And let me, we've gotten through one day. Oh, Brenda Rhodey, is that who I'm talking to? Okay, sorry, Brenda. Yeah, I know you. I think that's who I'm talking to. Yeah, Brenda's great, and you have a great mind for astrology as well, and I'm glad that you're here. I was wondering where you were at. Maybe that you've been here the whole time and I just didn't recognize your name. Okay, so friends, let's keep rolling. So that's the first, the opposition with Venus and Jupiter. One thing I wanted to point out is that this is something I was actually listening to Adam talk about astrology the other day. I was watching his explanation for his name change back to his birth name. And he was talking a lot about applying and separations. And I think that's one thing I don't focus on enough in my talks here. Oh, Brenda P, different Brenda. Oh man, two Brendas. Sorry, Brenda. Oh, Brenda, who has the, geez, sorry for being the the old man on the show. We had the talk where you have the show where you have your own kind of spirit talk show, right? And you had all the fancy cameras and everything. Am I remembering this correct now? We haven't talked in a while, other Brenda. Like, okay, but yes, now it's ringing a bell. I think I'm getting it again. So sorry. I'm so sorry that I'm not misidentifying some of you. But anyway, I was talking about, applications. So when I talk about these aspects perfecting, we're going to actually feel that a couple days beforehand, depending on how fast the planet is going. So we're going to feel those themes of Venus and Jupiter coming together the first few days of the month and the last days of September. And then we're going to feel the energy waning a few days after. So just consider that also, that will be something you were experiencing. So if you're trying to time things, the actual event might happen before the perfection on some level, and you may be able to deal with it in the days after as well. Okay, so let's look at the second, because on the second, you're going to see Mercury is going to station direct. Okay, so Mercury stationing direct at 24 degrees of Virgo, simultaneously making its heliacal morning rise. Now, what does that mean? Okay, that means that Mercury is going to be outside of the 15-degree standardized degree distance of the beams of the sun. And I'm using Demetra George's standardization. Some Hellenistic astrologers use 15 degrees and standardize it. Other astrologers throughout history have used different degree orbs. But I like this standardization. Often I think of the chart as an oracle. And often like how we prime the pump of tarot, and we say, if we get this card, it will mean this. I think we can do a little bit of the same for the chart. Some people will disagree with me, but I think that if we set expectations, the chart will speak. So, yes. All right, Brenda. All right, right. I remember I got a 20-second delay here, but yes, now I remember. Yeah, that short, little sassy haircut. I know you now. Okay, sorry, friends. Okay, so let's talk about Mercury stationing direct while simultaneously making an appearance. This is called a moment of phasis. So this is a moment that is speaking louder than some of the other moments. And you could see that this is happening, right, with an opposition to Neptune. So we're going to have something coming to light that may be a little bit confusing at first, okay? Because I really do think that Neptune, it clouds things. It gives us a lens that isn't necessarily reality. It is more so less about the physical reality, maybe more about a spiritual consciousness, I don't know. But Mercury in the third decan of Virgo is like the most physically committed Mercury placement in probably the entire zodiac. It's the one that says, what is real? What is the reality of this? What stays and what goes? Whereas Neptune is trying to cloud that picture a little bit. So I would say that you're going to want to really clarify your communications and your details so that you can move forward with whatever practical, physical project that you've been reviewing over the last few weeks with Mercury stationing retrograde. Pay attention to messages you get, but again, ask for clarification, because it might not be, you might not understand it correctly the first time you hear about it. The other thing is Mercury's still squaring Mars in this case too. So make sure that your communications are kind. This Mercury is one that is, I think, committed to efficiency. I've been wearing some magically elected oil with this decan, with Mercury in this decan. I love it. It's great. It's great for getting stuff done. It's not as good for I don't know, making peace and harmony with people. I think it's more like, don't bother me. I've got stuff to do. So there might be a little bit of energy around that where you're just like, I don't have time. I'm just anxious. It's not good for relaxing. It's good for like, I've got this project, I need to get it done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So that is probably what we're going to be feeling on the 2nd of October. The other thing that's happening on the 2nd of October is we have a square between the sun and the moon. So this is our first quarter. If we look at this in totality, okay, we've got Mercury stationing direct, making its heliacal morning rise, becoming a morning star. We have the sun in its fall and the moon in its exile, squaring one another. So it's not a fun time for the luminaries. It's difficult for us to assert our individual agenda or our identity with the sun in Libra, because Libra is requiring us to take other people's perspective and find balance into account. The moon in Capricorn is not super happy in Saturn sign because the moon is wanting growth. It wants nurturing. It wants unconditional love and acceptance. And when it moves through Capricorn, sometimes there are conditions. The territory is cold and harsh and rocky, and we may not feel as secure or as I don't know, welcomed. And I guess Saturn casts things into exile, and the moon wants to belong to something, right? It was also considered a planet of the masses, so we may feel like we're not belonging, and maybe due to a real challenge with a relationship compromise. Now, the moon in the first decan of Capricorn may be asking us to consider the advantages and disadvantages of a physical place. Yeah, Kate says Capricorn can be pragmatic, right? So we may be thinking, well, where are we going to put down our roots? Where is this partnership going? Where do we want to live? What goal do we want to pursue? And what are the actual tangible challenges or advantages of doing that? And that could, again, with Mercury opposing Neptune, it's important to ask questions. Don't make assumptions at this beginning of this month, because it can be really easy to get confused, and that can lead to disagreements that could be easily avoided if you are just, able to approach someone from the spirit of, with your get along pants on, right? From the spirit of trying to find clarity. Because it's hard to get understanding sometimes. There's so much emotion that goes into the way that we communicate that oftentimes we don't want to rock the boat. We want to be nice. And sometimes when we're nice, that can lead to misunderstandings because we make assumptions. This is the 4 agreements, right? Don't make assumptions. And you're just doing your best. You're not a mean person if you ask questions. You're just trying to create further harmony so that you know the reality of a situation. A lot of times we just want to avoid confrontations, and oftentimes when we avoid a confrontation, it's going to boomerang back on us with an even more difficult conversation than if we'd had the tough conversation in the beginning of the process. So something to think about. Okay, so that's the sun in the first decan of Libra. When we get to the 3rd of the month, we're going to see the sun move into the 2nd decan of Libra. And the 2nd decan of Libra is pretty interesting. It's Austin Coppock calls it 2 links in a chain. T. Susan Chang has a name for it I really like, the ties that bind. It is a double Saturn-ruled decan. It is associated with the 3 of Swords in the Rider-Waite Tarot. And here you can see a card that a lot of people are kind of afraid of, with 3 swords piercing a heart and it's raining. They call it the Lord of Sorrow. It is... I'm starting to understand it a little bit better, though. I don't necessarily fear it as much as I did in the past. I think that the main theme with this decan is oaths and contracts, binding agreements. It is negotiating the deal on some level. It's because of Saturn's influence. It says this is what you have to do to bring things back into harmony. So these are the vows that you have to make. It can also, when we have a difficult planet moving through this decan, we can have broken agreements. I often have clients with Mars in this decan, in the second decan of Libra, that really experience betrayals and broken agreements, and it's very painful for them. And they are learning how to kind of pick themselves back up after those challenging experiences, because remember, Mars severs and separates. It's severing agreements that we thought we could count on. So the sun will bring us an awareness of what we need to do for commitment. This decan can also be about marriage. I know that the card itself looks very like difficult for relationships, but sometimes a marriage can be something that it's not just our vision of 18th century romantic love. It is about doing the difficult things through sickness and in health, through good and for ill, right? Being truly committed to someone means that you're there for them through the good times and the bad. And that's not always an easy thing to do. And it takes a constant recommitment to a relationship. So the thing to understand about ancient society, or ancient Greek society, or another ancient society, is that because most people couldn't read, an oath, or a blood oath, or a spoken oath was very important. And if you broke your word, that was one of the worst things that you could do. Like if you gave your word, that was something. It wasn't like now we're like, oh, it has to be in writing. Oh, well, I didn't get a signed contract. And it wasn't like that back then. If you broke your word, like you were in trouble, sometimes punishable by death. So I think that it's important to honor your commitments. It's important to shine the light of awareness on the things that you are committed to during this time. You can renegotiate things if you don't, think that the commitments are fair. You can, use that Venusian energy with Venus hanging out there to try to renegotiate a better deal potentially. But I do think that Saturn brings consequences for breaking an agreement during this period of time. So I do think it's very important to honor your commitments. And again, honoring your commitments isn't always fun. That's what Saturn's influence is in Libra. It's not just beauty and flowers and symmetry. Sometimes it's hard work, and making a relationship work is sometimes very hard work. And sometimes it requires us to give up something that was important to us for the sake of the relationship, for the sake of the commitment itself. And as inherently selfish human beings, that's not an easy thing to do. So good luck with that, with all of your relationships. Remember, communication is the key. If the relationship itself is more important than your ego, it should make it a lot easier to navigate. Some good comments here. Let's see. Oh, Urania says you need that oil. Yeah. If for those of you who are curious about Tanya's magical workings, she has a website called Third Coast Mojo. It's an Etsy right now for the most part. And she has some Venus oils up right now. The Mercury series and the Jupiter series that she has aren't live, but they will be hopefully shortly. I've been encouraging her to put that out into the world a little bit more. The challenge is that my partner, Tanya Andrews, has a full-time job, and she has a lot of responsibility running a farmer's market. And sometimes it's just when you have a full-time job, trying to get your side hustle going, it can be a lot of work, and it can be a lot of sometimes there's mental hurdles over it when you just want to relax. And but I think that she's getting more comfortable being more public about the work that she does, and I'm trying to help out with that because it's really good stuff. I've been the main beneficiary of it, and I have some friends that, I guess if you reach out to me, I can help facilitate some of these things that aren't live too. I've done that for some friends, but it is really good stuff. That Mercury and Virgo series, it's in its own face, it's in its exaltation and domicile. She does some hoodoo work as well. And there's a version of that oil called the Master Key, which helps you learn things quicker, which is great for this book I'm diving into with this group. and a wisdom of Solomon oil, which I also really enjoy as far as like tapping into the higher self. So some really, really cool stuff coming, hopefully. And I think that, like I said, she's going to become more public with that in the future. Do 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 the Mario song, right? Stefan says I can get pessimistic at times. Natal Saturn in Taurus, directly opposite my Jupiter in Scorpio. Yeah, I mean Saturn can dampen our enthusiasm at times, but if you lean into the Saturn energy, it will bring rewards over time. So Susanna says, I'm pretty sure that I have it right, that the moon can be out of bounds only in Cap, Sag, Gemini, and Cancer, and maybe rarely Scorpio or Gemini. Again, I'm not so sure. I don't know. You could be right. You may be right. I may be crazy. And the moon just may be out of bounds in just those signs. I don't know. But it's something for us to all explore as a group, right? Raven says, I can't wait for Mercury to station direct. My laptop died. Oh no. Lost all my files, locked my keys in the car, and got attacked by a cat. Oh no. Poor baby. Poor kitty. Poor you, actually. But I hope that you and the cat are okay. Yeah, this Mercury's retrograde's been funky. Lots of people have been going through a lot of difficulties. Schedule-wise, I locked myself out of my house when the first day, like it got cold, like the first day of fall, I locked myself out of my house and had to wait for my partner to come home. And I was not wearing enough layers at that point either. So yeah, I'm looking forward to maybe this Mercury direct as well. Let's see. All sorts of good comments. Yeah, thank you for the encouragement for Tanya's work, everyone. I appreciate that. She's a really sweet person and really knowledgeable on this stuff, but sometimes it's difficult to put yourself out there. There's a lot of biases around that kind of thing. And I think, just like we're all going through our own coming out as far as just being fans of astrology, there's even more stigma when it comes to astrological magic and things like that. So it's something to do baby steps with, I think, on some level. Would you like to write a book one day, Spencer? Yes, I would. I will say, when I was 11 years old, and I don't know what was going on in my chart, I'll have to look this up, but I told my dad, I was like, I'm going to write a book on philosophy someday. And he was like, what? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to write a philosophical book. I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to write about what I believe in philosophy. And that was when I was 11. So there has to be something like that in my future. It took me a long time to make an album of my music, so I'm sure it will also take me, hopefully not as long. It took me a decade to do my music album, but hopefully I've learned how not to be so much of a perfectionist that I can't consolidate my thoughts into something. But yes, I would love to do that. So please help encourage me to continue to do that. And maybe for those of you who want to see that, I'm always open to ideas. I want it to be of service to folks. So if there's something if there is a need that I need to fill with my research, I would love to be able to do that. Okay. A learning song too. Yeah. That was Billy Joel's "You May Be Right." For those of you trying to place it from, I think it's from Glass Houses, but I could be wrong. Okay. Yes, people lock themselves out of the house. Yes, that's a very Mercury retrograde type of thing. Not being able to cross the threshold, right? Not having the key. Yes, and as you are pointing out that there might be racist stigmatism around hoodoo specifically. Yes, that's a good point. My partner is Black, and she connects with the hoodoo tradition as being part of her roots, and there definitely is some racial bias and stigma against it. So it is something that she grew up with between worlds. She's part Black and part white. She has a white mom and a Black dad, and there was a lot of respectability politics that went into growing up like that and growing up in a white part of Sacramento. And I think that it does take time for people to become comfortable in their own skin, as we've seen with, our good friend Adam Ellenboss. And sometimes it's okay to change your mind. I love that he said that. We're all exploring who we are and our identity and our process of individuation and becoming. And it's okay to change your mind. You may decide to go down one path and then discover that that's not the path for you, and then be able to make a pivot. And it takes a lot of humility and courage to be able to do that. And I'm really happy for him that he's found the courage to be whatever version of himself resonates with him now. And I hope the same for all of you and for my partner. And it's just a growth process, right? Okay. All right. Yes, glass houses. Nadini says, okay, good. I've got that right. Billy Joel, glass houses. You may be right. I love these comments. I volunteer to be a pre-reader, Dimphy says. Volunteered as well for Ren Butler's new book and found myself being mentioned in the acknowledgments under Becca Tarnas. Well, Dimphy, if I have a copy that I need edited, I will keep you in mind and try to send that to you. Okay. All right. Yes, Cap Rising needs encouragement. Tanya is a Cap Rising. So yes, check her out. Third Coast Mojo on Etsy. It's still, her website's, there's something funky with her website right now. She shifted servers and it's hard to find it in search engines. But here, for those of you, I'll just do my due diligence for all of you today. This is, I'll put it in the chat. This is me being a good partner and a good salesperson and a good support person. I hope that, hope I can even find it on here. I bookmarked it. There it is. Yeah, I can't even find it in a search engine, which is crazy. So here's the Etsy. I'm putting it in the chat for those of you who want to support her work. Like I said, she has Venus stuff up right now, but if you send her a message and you really are interested in the Mercury or Jupiter and Pisces, there's also a Venus and Pisces series that isn't out yet either, but she has all of those. And if you message her, we've got a whole week off coming up. Like, she has a week off of work and I'm going to be off. So there might be an opportunity to kind of start moving forward with that. Okay. So back to the astrology. Sorry for the digressions here. I think they're good digressions though. We just kind of go where we go with these chats. And thank you for hanging around. Okay. Let's see. October 3rd. We gotta roll. October. We're an hour and 15 minutes in. I'm at October 3rd. So I think that I've described the second decan of Libra, the oaths and binding contracts, understanding of the other and your commitments, negotiations, negotiating a contract may be something that you come to terms with around this period of time. So let's start off by looking at October the 5th. Now here is where we have the Hellenistic void of course, which is different than modern void of course. So what we're looking at here, this is going to be happening around 6:45 p.m. So I'm going to just show you what we're looking at and how to find this in a chart. So here's the moon. Here is Mars. And here is let me see. Yes. So Mars is going to be the player in this game. So what happens is the moon is making a trine to Mars and then doesn't make any other aspects for 30 degrees across sign boundaries to any other traditional planet. Okay. So we're not counting Neptune here. We're not counting Uranus or Pluto. Okay. We're just counting the 7 traditional planets. And you can see that the moon is going to eventually, the next aspect it makes is a trine to Mars 2 days later. So no aspects to the traditional 7 planets. A trine to Mars that eventually becomes a square. So the moon will go void at 21 degrees of Aquarius, which is right on my descendant. So that should be fun. And then it'll square Mars at 22 degrees of Pisces to 22 degrees of Gemini. So what does that mean? Well, ancient astrologers would describe it as nothing will come of the matter. Think of the moon draws down planetary energies and distributes it to the physical world. So it doesn't have anything to draw upon, and it's just kind of wandering aimlessly. And that wasn't a good condition in the ancient world, to be wandering aimlessly without a sense of home or purpose. So what I would suggest with this, Hellenistic void, of course, release your expectations for this period of time. I wouldn't schedule anything super important because it might not work out exactly the way that you want it to. I think this is a great time to relax. It's a great time to get rid of things. It's a great time to clean and declutter your home. It's a great time to just accept things as they come. All right? Don't schedule a super important meeting or something of that nature. Tanya and I are maybe thinking of traveling around this period of time, but I'm a little nervous about that. Maybe it'll be just a relaxing trip. Maybe it'll be difficult. I don't know. But it's one of these things where I think that there's probably going to be challenges to manifesting something. The moon is a manifester. So if you're trying to finish something or bring something into being, this isn't really the best time for that. If you're trying to go into your memory, imagination, if you're trying to release things, I think this is a good time for that. Nadini says a walkabout. Yeah, I like that. I like that. I think that this is something that I don't really pay attention to modern void of courses anymore. I really don't. I know a lot of people that are like, I just don't even do anything during those. And that's like every 3 days. That's just not realistic. But this one, I definitely feel it only happens like once a year, maybe once every 2 years. And I know I went specifically back in my journals and read about what happened during those periods of time. I remember I also was having like a real difficulty with some business partners the last time this happened. And there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of things that weren't clear. And when it finally escaped this position, clarity came. I went back and forth in my brain a lot with all this. So there may be something where you just, I would say be gentle with yourself. That's good advice for a lot of things, but especially when this moon is void, of course, in the Hellenistic definition. Okay. Tammy Dollar says, have your wife claim and add her business on Google Maps. Then she can put the business info in accurately. She can just use the city center if you don't want to use the house address. That's a great idea, Tammy. Thank you for that. Yeah, we need to get her search engine, her SEO stuff like really fixed, because she's just completely invisible with all this right now, even though the stuff is just awesome. It's great stuff. I wear the Mercury stuff almost every day now. She has a great Venus and Taurus oil that I've loved. It was an awesome election from a few years ago that we had a big supply of that has been really great. I'm wearing Venus and Libra oil today. There's a Nervine version that helps you to relax. It's like a Spica Venus oil. I have a Glamour oil on today, if you could see the glow in my skin. And I also use Sphere and Sundry stuff too. I really love them too. I have a Regulus oil from them that I've been wearing. I like the Deneb El Gedi oil from Sphere and Sundry, and I gave the Fomahalt oil a spin the other day. I love their fixed star stuff. So, it's great to support multiple creators, and there's so many different wonderful metaphysical businesses that deserve your business. Okay, let's see. So that's the void of course moon from October the 5th to October the 7th. During that period of time, there is going to be one aspect that perfects, and that is, and maybe that gives us some insight, now that I think about it, into what would be most effective during this period of time. And I think it's exactly what I was talking about. Clear out the clutter. So there's a trine between Mercury and Pluto. I know what I want to do during this period of time If I'm being honest, I don't want to travel during this period of time. Um, my partner's dad is getting older, and we need to visit him. And there's a lot of, I don't know, there's some family pressure to do that, and I think it is important to visit your aging parents. But they're right in the line of where the hurricane is, and I'm just a little nervous about that in North Carolina. What I want to do is clean out my basement and clean out my attic and like just get rid of all the crap in my house. That's what I would love to do during this period of time. And what better aspect than Mercury trining Pluto from Virgo to Capricorn? I think this is a great time, like I said, to just go deep into your material resources and really decide what stays and what goes. You're not going to want to start anything during this time. You're going to want to eliminate things. You're going to want to like uncover any corruption in your home and just say, oh, I got to fix this. I got to get rid of this. I think that's a great way to work with this energy, with this Mercury Pluto trine. Have deep conversations with people. If there's something that comes up, Pluto, and to me, Pluto always uncovers something that we've repressed, that we've ignored, that we've, cast underground. And for me, I've got a mess in my basement that needs to be cleaned up. I've got a mess in my attic that I've been ignoring for, this is a 3-story house with the attic included, and it gets way hot up there in the summer. And now it's cold enough that it's comfortable enough to clean it out. So again, that would be my recommendation for this period of time. So that's the only aspect during the void of course moon. Let's keep rolling. When we get to October the 8th, now here's an interesting synchronicity. Mercury is going to trine Pluto, and then immediately Pluto will station direct. So if you go and review all the corrupted systems that you have and try to use that really powerful juiced up Mercury at its really close to its most powerful position, you might be able to like really move things forward with your sense of transformation, right? With your sense of empowerment. There's nothing that's more empowering to people with Virgo placements than cleaning your house and organizing your space and your stuff. I can speak from experience, because as within, so without, as above, so below. Because really what a lot of times what us Virgo folks are trying to do is organize our minds, organize our hearts, organize our souls and our spirits. And sometimes by just rearranging your space, that can free up chi. It can improve the feng shui in your space, and that in turn can lead to better outcomes in your experience. So again, that is confirmed by Pluto turning direct. Let me look. Thank you so much, Susanna, for the super sticker. That's awesome. Appreciate you. Oh yeah, Dimphy says, love Tanya as well in the live show. I'll have to have Tanya back on as a guest one of these days. Like I said, she's just been busy with managing a farmer's market for the first time this year. She got promoted to the farmer's market manager. So she's been learning a lot of new skills, but she's a really good community servant, I think, and is doing a lot of good in that job. But I think that once she starts getting the hang of it, she'll have more time to come on and do stuff with me on the channel and do more of her own witchy business stuff. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Gail says, I'm actually cleaning my basement as I listen. Yay, Gail, good for you. I'm excited for that. A long-awaited project, feeling the energy of letting go of what is no longer necessary. That's a great point, Gail, because when we let go of what isn't serving us, of what is an old, outdated form, what we're really doing is saying that we're ready to be the version of ourselves that we are now, and that we accept ourselves as we are now. If we're hanging on to the past, there's a level of non-acceptance that is happening because we're staying attached to an old version of ourselves. This is why I just really appreciate Adam. And, I appreciated his courage to change his name in his journey to Bhakti as well, because that was important to him at that time. And that's what his truth was at that time. even though it was probably strange for him and for some of his community. And then the change back is like, well, that's his truth now. So there's always room for a new experience. And even if that new experience is reconnecting with a part of yourself that you may have lost or that you may have strayed away from for a period of time, it's okay. That's part of a journey of being human. So I love the fact that when we're cleaning out our spaces, we're really telling the universe, I'm ready to be who I am now. And I trust that whatever I need is going to come to me in time. That's been hard for me. It's trusting that what I need will come to me. I'm a little bit of a pack rat myself. And I always feel so good, though, when I get rid of the things that just aren't a reflection of who I am anymore. I'm a big fan of the Marie Kondo method, although it's a little extreme. I did a Kondo session, I guess you would say, a few years ago, and I got rid of some stuff that in hindsight, I wish I hadn't, but honestly, I probably don't miss it that much. I just, if I wasn't thinking about it, I wouldn't be any worse for the wear. Let's see. Yes, Stimpy, all sorts of good comments about getting rid of what you don't need anymore. Pluto is on Kate's natal Mercury in the 6th, hoping to move on and forward with all it's correlated to. Well, I hope so too for you, Kate. So let's keep going, friends. So Pluto stationing direct on the 8th, you're going to feel it. Like I said, you're going to feel Pluto slowing down and changing direction probably during that entire void of course moon, is my guess. So take a look at the Capricorn area of your chart, and there's probably going to be some changes happening. You're going to feel some shifts around that area. So that's leading us to the full moon in Aries. So here is the full moon. So again, all of these things are happening simultaneously. The void of course moon leading to a waxing full moon here. The Mercury trine, a new stationing direct Pluto. And this full moon has Venus hanging out with it very closely. The moon is pretty close to Chiron if you use asteroids. I sort of do. I'm interested in it. It's not always the first thing I look at, but in this case, it's close enough that I think it's probably worth our attention. Jupiter is also still opposite this new moon, and those are the main things that I'm seeing in this particular lunation. So Venus is going to be hanging out on a fixed star called Algorab. And Algorab is one that I really love to tell the story of the crow that was tasked with filling the sacred cup of Apollo. And it was very important that the crow fulfill this task, but he got distracted by figs. He got distracted by the earthly delights, shiny things, objects, good food, and he failed to fulfill his task. So I think it's very important that it's especially important. Remember, this is the decan that's about oaths and contracts. So it's funny that Algorab is part of this story because he basically did not fulfill his contract and suffered the consequences. He also tried to blame Hydra, the sea serpent, for this failure. You can see in the sky, these stories are connected. Crater the Cup, Hydra, the sea serpent, and Corvus, the crow, are all connected constellationally. So there is a story that has come up with their connection. So if you have an integrity lapse during this time, and sometimes it happens, try to own it. Try to take responsibility for it. And this may be something that it comes to light with the full moon. It's important not to cast aspersions onto others, not to blame others, to be honest and truthful. It'll make your life go a lot easier. One of the most challenging, energy draining things in the world is trying to maintain a lie over time. I've done it. It's not easy. It is there's a lot of shame around it. There's a lot of trying to keep your story straight. And ultimately, I've always found that it doesn't add anything to my life. So, having a core fundamental honesty with others and with yourself, the lies that are most insidious are the ones we tell ourselves. And I think that it's important that we own any responsibilities that we have around this period of time, that we focus, we eliminate distractions. That could be another thing that Mercury and Pluto could be doing, is just getting rid of the distractions so that we have a good system for being productive in our life. And the moon hanging out with Chiron, there may be some trauma that we're dealing with, some wound about how we assert our independence versus how we take care of our responsibilities. I think it is important to take your own needs into account when you are in partnership as well. There's a balance, right? You have to fulfill your obligations, but you also have to fulfill your obligation to yourself and treating yourself with respect. No one is benefited by someone who completely sacrifices all of their self-interest for a partnership. Eventually what that does is it leads to resentment. And resentment can be very toxic. And it's not, I think it's very difficult when people, myself included, have martyred ourselves to a cause or a partnership, or for the thought of doing what the right thing, or doing something that would create harmony. Eventually, when we go to extremes, it leads to its opposite. This is something you learn from studying the Tao, is you see that yin-yang symbol, that there's a little bit of light in the dark and there's a little bit of dark in the light, and they're constantly moving within one another. And when you go to its extreme, it reverses course. So if you are giving up your sense of self to the extreme, it will eventually reverse and snap back on you and create the opposite of what you want it to create, which is disharmony, right? Same thing if you're being overly selfish. If you're not taking other people's needs into account, that will ultimately snap back on you, because you will have to become aware of someone else, because you'll come into conflict with them. So instead of a balanced relationship, you're in a war with them and you're engaging with them anyway. And I think it's better to engage with people from a balanced and harmonious perspective. So I hope that makes sense. And I think that's the kind of the main deal for this full moon. Mars is going to be hosting the moon, so there also, we might want to bring that into the discussion, where Mars is hanging out in the third decan of Gemini, where we're really trying to eliminate some options. We're trying to eliminate some distractions, eliminate pathways that we imagine might be more beneficial than the one that we're already on. This is a Mars and Gemini type of thing. It says, hey, you're going to create conflict if you try to pursue every single dream. And it's okay to get rid of a few of the imagined pathways and breathe life into that which is most important to you. Now remember, Mars is going to be starting to slow down towards the end of the month. So we may have to review the choices that we've made and say, well, we don't want to paint things in black and white. We don't want to paint things in high contrast extremes. That's the challenge of Mars and Gemini. I think that's the challenge of this full moon. Mars in Gemini 3 wants to make an ultimatum. It says, you do this or this is going to happen. You do this or I'm going to execute you, right? This is the executioner's sword in Austin Coppock's book, 36 Faces. It makes philosophical positions that are difficult to back away from. And I would advise against that, because there is nuance in Gemini. There's a need to be flexible and see multiple perspectives, both in Gemini and Libra. And you may find that if you draw a line in the sand, you're going to have a very humbling retrograde experience, where you probably are going to have to back off that position, and you may find yourself in a really tight spot. So stay curious, my friends. I feel like the Dos Equis guy. I'm like the Dos Equis guy of curiosity instead of stay thirsty. Stay curious, ask questions, leave some room for ambiguity, leave some room for the gray area. That's important around this full moon. Okay. Stephen says, yes, I've been learning new things, learning new techniques with astrology, and Jupiter transiting my fifth has amped up my creativity. Well, awesome, Stephen. Sounds like you're having a good transit there. I like Jupiter in the fifth. That's a fun transit for the most part. Kate says, I tend to forfeit my needs and become vulnerable to overcompensate. Yes, Many of us do. I've done that in the past. I do it a lot less now because I suffered because of it. And if you knew me at age 20 versus age 42 now, no is my first answer a lot more than yes than it used to be. I used to say yes to everything, and it really was stressful. Now I'm kind of like, I'll think about that, but probably not. But if I only say yes if it's like a super huge 100% yes, and that's actually made my life a lot simpler, and it's liberating. Okay. Okay. You all have such wonderful comments. I'm just going to keep going with the astrology here and try to get us through it. On the 10th of October, we have an ingress of a planet. So you could see that our good friend Hermes, aka Mercury, is going to be ingressing back into Libra. It was originally in Libra a few weeks ago before retrograding back into Virgo to tie up some loose ends and complete some material processes, but now our minds may be shifting to finding equality, balance, and fairness. Again, we may be also becoming aware of an injustice and communicating what we perceive might be more fair. Now, Mercury is going to be coming into an opposition over the next few days after the 10th with Jupiter. So I don't know about all of you, but I've had some situations in the past few months when this aspect was activated where someone, either myself or another party, really wanted to do something that was very individually focused. And there was quite a big conflict because these actions were impulsive actions that would have had a detrimental effect on a partnership. And there's multiple things I can think of. And I'm not going to go into specifics with this, but there were situations where an individually inspired action that was sort of rash, Jupiter in Aries, had to be renegotiated by Mercury in Libra. So think about that and go back to the time when this happened originally a few weeks ago and see if you can identify some situation like that, because it's probably circling back around, or something similar is circling back around again. So that's going to be active from the 10th to the 12th or so. In the midst of all this, on the 11th, we have a trine between Saturn and the Sun. So it's time to sober up a little bit. It's time to do the mature thing. It's probably a good time to commit to a new ideal. You may have to, like I said, as these two things are happening simultaneously, look at that. Isn't that interesting? So it's always a symphony that's going on in the sky. It's not always just one aspect. All these things are happening together. And I know we talk about them individually, but we really have to see them as a whole in a picture. Yeah, and Raven's saying if it's not a yes, it's a no. Yeah, I think so. Although with the caveat, there's some things that you would rather not do that you have to do out of duty. So I think that's something that I would make as a little asterisk on that. There's plenty of things that I didn't want to do that were not a yes, that I knew I had to, because I would put someone else at an extreme disadvantage if I didn't. And I think that there's the difference between that. But if there's something that isn't a duty that you were like, well, I could do it or I could not, and it's not 100% yes, then that is what I think about that. I think that it's important to make that clarification, because if you are like, I don't want to take the trash out this week, and you do that too many times in a row, it's not 100% yes. Your house is going to be full of garbage and it'll be disgusting. So again, you have to be able to have the discernment with that type of philosophy. But back to this Saturn Sun's trine. So Saturn is slowing down as well and about to station direct at the end of the month. Really what Saturn is doing in the second decan of Aquarius is it's trying to move us forward. If we look at the picture in the tarot, it tells us it's trying to move us from one ideal to another. And I say ideal because it's an air sign. And it's really like, I really see Saturn in Aquarius as saying, here is the blueprint to craft a community around. Okay. Here are the rules. Here are your limitations. Here is your glass ceiling. Here is the beliefs that will either lead to peace and structure and balance, or to consequences if you aren't following the rules on some level. So I do think a lot of us have been trying to move on from one experience to another. I mean, personally, I'm in a seventh house Saturn ruled perfection year, and seventh house being related to endings and completion. And I've had many, since my birthday, I've had to come to terms with the passing of many people in my family. I've had my daughter moving on from being a child to being an adult and moving out of the house and starting her own life. And it's a transitory period. It's a liminal space. It's like, who are you now that you are as you move on to the next experience? And we've probably been reviewing who we are and what we want, the ideals that inform who we are and what we want to be. So this is I think an interesting time where our ability to commit to our new ideals is important. See, we're bringing in the awareness of our commitments with the sun in the second decan of Libra, and then, bringing Saturn into the equation with saying, what is the blueprint that we're going to create from? I really love this book by Charles Obert, The Classical Seven Planets, where he talks about the relationship between Saturn and Jupiter and how they're very almost inseparable philosophically. They're part of the same sect. And he's talking about ancient astrologers thought of Saturn as giving the blueprint to Jupiter to create from. And I really like that. And I really like that Saturn's kind of setting the agenda, and Jupiter is bringing things into form and making everything into, is procreating. If you look at all the myths associated with Jupiter, it is a very procreative, deity in Zeus. So that's something I think we're considering around the 11th of October with these two very important transits happening simultaneously: self versus other, considering how your actions affect other people, and then doing the sober thing that is probably taking into account everybody's needs rather than just the individual needs, and maybe even everyone's needs as a community, not just as in partnership. Okay. Yes, Lisa says Saturn is not up for negotiation. Yes and no. It's much harder to negotiate with Saturn than like with Mercury or even Venus on some level. Remember, Saturn is exalted in Libra. So I do think that there probably are arguments, and I mean that in like the courtroom metaphor, to be made about what is just and what isn't with Saturn. So I think that sometimes there will be testimony so that we can get all the information. And it's more or less like a negotiation with Saturn. It's more like a fact-finding mission. So I think what you're referring to, Lisa, and I'm trying not to misinterpret your comment, but yeah, there's things that Saturn will bring you that are non-negotiable. They're like, this is just what you have to do. And there's not really any getting out of it. You're bound to it. There's a binding energy to Saturn. And I think that when I look at clients' charts, I say, where's your Saturn? What are you bound to develop over time through potentially being denied that when you were young? I have Saturn in the third decan of Virgo. I was not very organized as a young person. In fact, my room was a nuclear bomb of chaos. It was very messy. And now, as I've gotten older, I've really, really had to organize my space, organize my budget, because it's in the second house, and be responsible with how I order my space and my time and my resources. So that's something to think about. And it develops over time. It's a slow burn. It's not something that happens overnight. Saturn never gives gifts instantaneously. Looking at the chat, with Saturn exalted in Libra, does it seem like trying to find a diplomatic way? Yes. I think a secret signification of Saturn, and we'll talk about this as we get to the third decan of Libra, is balance. I think that the daimon in Libra 3 is Nemesis. And Nemesis was trying to restore right proportion into the random distributions of fate by 2K or fortune. So through our actions, we are restoring balance through our sober actions. And to me, this has some significations with the 12th house as well. Saturn, it takes its joy in the 12th house. And I do have somewhat of an opinion and some experience with this, having both the Sun and Mercury in the 12th house, is that the planets that are in the 12th house are going through a rebalancing of their energy. Something about that energy is off and has gone to some kind of extreme or imbalanced place. And through some really difficult, hard lessons, it is becoming more mature. It is becoming more balanced. It is reigniting equilibrium or rebalancing. I found that with my son. Like, my son is there. I've had to go through a lot of different changes with my identity and my ego. I've gone through wild swings of extreme overconfidence and extreme underconfidence. I've had to learn how to regulate, confidence level with the sun there. I've gone through extremes of family things with the sun in Cancer, like a lot of exile and disappointment, to also having to create my own sense of home and family on some level. And Mercury there too. My mind has gone through those extreme swings. So I agree that Saturn is I really do think a secret signification of Saturn is it desires harmony. It desires balance. I think that when we deal with Saturnian challenges, it's because there is an excess. And I think that the one thing Saturn hates more than anything else is excess. Okay, so think of it as a consolidating energy to remove unhealthy excesses. Okay. Looking at the chat. All right. There's a lot of good comments. Kobabs is here. What's up, Kobabs? Nice to see you. Raven says, would you say planets transiting the 12th house could see some of the themes as well? Yes. If you have a planet transiting the 12th house, there's probably that energy in your life is a little bit out of whack. And it's saying to me, take a break, relax, live into the answer, release some of the expectations around that planet, and bring it back into harmony. And then once it goes back in your first house, you're able to utilize that and be empowered by that. That's something to think about. Is a planet is in the 12th house before it moves into the 12th. It's like in the womb. It is being alchemized in the 12th house. And then you have it at your disposal. So let's say you have Saturn moving through your 12th house. You're getting a rebalancing energy with how you take responsibility in your life. And once it moves into your first, you'll be able to use that energy. Okay, so this is something to think about with that. It's a pregnancy period. It's a gestation period for that energy. There's always a way to look at things in the positive, I think, on some level. Okay, so that's October the 11th. Let's keep rolling. On the 12th, okay, after the Sun Saturn trine, and really in the midst of the Sun Saturn trine, we are having also simultaneously a square between Mars and Neptune. Now again, you all have been subject to my Neptune bias, which isn't really quite favorable. Mostly because I'm a person who enjoys having tangible organization and control. And Neptune removes some of that and dissolves some of that. So what happens when it meets up with Mars? Well, I think that it's going to lead to potentially some fluidity required in our will or in our action. We may be taking some actions that we don't really know how they're going to turn out. They may require a leap of faith. They may be, we may be overthinking something where Neptune is saying just leap and have faith, right? I think that this third decan of Pisces is really, I get a crusader's energy with that, like where we're willing to sacrifice anything to make our dream come true. And Mars in the third decan of Gemini is saying, you're not going to be able to do everything that you want to do. You're going to have to make a choice. One twin has to give up some immortality. One twin is going to die. The other, for them to live again, you got to sacrifice something. So I think that there may be some challenges around this Mars-Neptune square where we are trying to achieve a certain ideal, and we just can't do everything if we want to bring it into the material realm. And there's probably going to be some frustration with that. There's probably going to be a lot of overthinking that may lead to a little bit of burnout. Again, I often experience personally Neptune transits as feeling a little bit of physical burnout and needing to surrender to some kind of energy. Robert Schmidt called Neptune a transcendental moon, universal substance. I really believe it is a solvent. I believe Neptune is something that dissolves things back into undifferentiated form, right? Where when you bring something into being, you put all the atoms and the molecules together in a structure. And I think Neptune's action is really just dissolving those back into the individual parts and atoms and the substance that can be created from. So that's not always a fun experience as a human being. Sometimes it can be. It can be if what you're experiencing is something that needs to be dissolved and needs to be transcended. Then it can be positive. But that, I think, is what we're going to be going through with the Mars-Neptune square. And also, again, this is simultaneously happening with an opposition between Mercury and Jupiter. Okay, so just take it easy in mid-month. It's okay to rest. I saw a meme about Libra on just a pop astrology social media site where they were joking about trying to get Libra to do something physical. It's like, we don't do physical labor, and I can kind of relate to that. I think that Librans definitely can do physical things, but I think that my experience of Libra season is that I would much rather use my mind than my body. It's been harder for me to get out and take a walk as it's gotten darker and colder. It's a little bit cooler in my house, so it's like everybody's moving a little slower, but my mind is engaged. I want to study, I want to read, I want to communicate. So there's just a shift from the physical part of the year, maybe more towards the metaphysical or intellectual. And I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the other. It's just, we're just noticing the shifts in the energy. Looking through the chat, Raven says, thank you for the information, Spencer. I have a Jupiter moving through there right now, resonating with what you're talking about with the rebalancing. Yes. It's always interesting to see planets moving through our houses of that nature. Leela says, my son is currently in a court battle regarding paternity and custody of all three of his small sons. Hoping and praying October's energy shed light on its ex. Well, if you feel like there's an injustice that isn't being served, you can make a prayer to the Uranus, which, there's an Orphic hymn you can say to the Uranus if you want something to be reconciled. You can also pray to Nemesis to restore right proportion to a random distribution of fate. I think that may even be a better deity to work with in something of that ilk. I would also highly recommend Sphere and Sundry's Deneb Elgeti oil for dealing with legal issues. I'm really enjoying just setting healthy boundaries with that particular oil, mostly with my neighbors. I live in an active neighborhood block with lots of people around. And I just, they specifically talk about removing nuisances. And for someone who wants a peaceful sanctuary, it's been good for that. Okay, let me see. But sorry if I'm skipping some of these things. I'm trying to go a little bit more quickly so we get through these things. We're heading towards hour number 2 here, and I want to keep it to about 3 hours if I can. Allie Cat says, I'm thinking about Morpheus as an interesting Hellenistic archetype to apply to the planet Neptune. Yeah, the bringer of sleep and dream, right? That is interesting. We'll have to explore that further in class, Allie. Juliana says, hey, Spencer, glad I tuned in at the right time. Yes, welcome, friend. Juliana Fox is my a longtime friend, astrology student and client, and also my hairdresser. So I have actually, Juliana, sorry, I'm just nerding out here. Here's the 10th. This is going to be our haircut. Juliana's coming back to Michigan and is going to give me a haircut on this day as Venus is trining my natal Venus almost exactly. And the sun is trining my natal Venus. And we'll see. I think I'm going to chop the mop. Get a haircut once every year, 6 months or so, because I just don't really like dealing with it too much more than I have to. But anyway, welcome, friend. Okay, so back to the chart. That gets us through the sun in the second decan of Libra. We've got 2 more decans to go. Holy cow, we have 2 more decans to go. This has been a very meandering discussion today. It's been a good one. I hope that I think that those of you who are still with me and are sticking this out, you like these longer meandering ones. I think we've already lost all the audience that doesn't like going on this epic 2 to 3 hour journey. So I guess I'm not that worried about it. Maybe I'll have to experiment with shorter content form, but that's just not, I don't know, that's just not how I roll. Yeah, Juliana says, good timing for your new mane. Yes, indeed. So now we're looking at October the 13th, the sun in the third decan of Libra. And I'm gonna get a little snack here real quick so I can restore my blood sugar. So hold on one second. I've been drinking these protein shakes that are like gluten-free and dairy-free. I have a little bit of a dairy gluten sensitivity. And these are nice where I can just drink something real quick while I'm doing these marathon sessions and hopefully get a little bit of calories so that my blood sugar doesn't get too low and I start really, really getting spacey. That's been my experience. Okay. Yes, I am a little bit of a tangent teacher sometimes. Hopefully the tangents are helpful. Okay, Sun in Libra 3. Let's focus. This decan is called a gyroscope by Austin Coppock in his book 36 Faces and The Widening Gyre in T. Susan Chang's book 36 Secrets. We shift from a Saturn-ruled decan to a Jupiter/Mercury-ruled decan. So we have a 4 of Swords card associated with it, with a figure that is resting. Excuse me. Book T calls this rest from strife, or Book of Thoth calls it the truce, the Lord of Truce. So maybe this is the time after we've had a conflict, or we've either established an agreement or a commitment or an oath, or we've had an oath broken, and now we're just resting after the negotiation, the conflict. It's Daimon is Nemesis that I talked about. Daimon, Nemesis restoring right proportion. And this is something that, one other tangent, if you'll forgive me for one real quick here that I think is important. These 2 houses right here, 12 and 11, are called the Daimon houses, the houses of spirit. These 2 houses right here, 5 and 6, are called the houses of Tukey, or the houses of fortune. In them, Saturn joys in the 12th, Jupiter joys in the 11th. Venus joys in the 5th, and Mars joys in the 6th. These two planets are of the solar sect, which is called daimon on some level, and these two planets are of the lunar sect, which is associated with 2K. So this is like a little skeleton key for these two houses and planets. This is a really fun concept. So you can see that like we are restoring right proportion through Nemesis. They also called Saturn a planet of Nemesis on some level. So this is why I really think about the 12th house as a place where we're restoring balance to the random distributions of fate, where through our suffering, through our Sisyphean tasks, through pushing the boulder up the hill over and over again, we're almost purifying ourselves, I think, on some level. I've gone through this many times in my life. I've had a lot of good things happen in my life, and I've had a lot of really challenging things. And I think that, I'm not alone in this. And I don't talk about the challenging things in super detail. You all know some of them because I'm a public figure. But there's a lot that people don't know that was very tough growing up and in my youth and in my young adulthood as well. And oftentimes in my life, it's felt like pushing the boulder up the hill, only have another crisis keep happening. And one of the shifts that I've had to have with that is that I have learned I have the part of spirit in the third decan of Libra. So this is my roundabout way of describing Libra 3 to you. I have learned that there will always be some kind of chaos happening in my life. It's just the nature of being alive. And part of it is my perspective. Sometimes I've tended to focus on the things that were out of balance and made a crisis out of that and allowed those thoughts to challenge my own confidence, my own ability to move forward with my life. And what I've had to learn with the part of spirit, which Kat Rose Nelligan, one of my favorite astrologers who has a really great book on the lot of spirit, talks about meeting your fate through the lot of spirit. What I've had to learn is that through quieting my mind, through meditation, through prayer, through having an inner peace, that can lead to a better outcome externally. It's not that I have to find the external environment that is peaceful. I have to find my own inner balance and peace, and then I will bring that to the outer world and hopefully be a stabilizing force for my family, for my community, for my clients, for whoever needs a little bit of, peace and balance and harmony. And that's something that I really enjoy doing. I've also noticed that in some of my client work, I've realized that I will often take on a balancing energy to the client. If the client is very quiet, I will encourage them to be more vibrant and communicative. If the client is very bombastic, I'll encourage them to slow down and quiet down a little bit. It just doesn't matter which extreme they're at. I'm always encouraging balance. And I think that this decan is about maintenance of balance. We've established what is fair in the first two decans by acknowledging what is not fair in the first decan, coming into a more balanced, harmonious contractual agreement in the second, and then sort of making adjustments to maintain that peace over time. I think that that's what we're doing here. So planets in the 12th house, if we extend this out philosophically, we're making adjustments. There's something that wasn't working with that energy, with that planet, and we're trying to bring something back into harmony. There was something in, if I keep using myself as an example, something that wasn't working with, let's use my Mercury this time, it's the ruler of the 2nd and the 11th house. There's something that wasn't working with the way that I thought about my resources and about my relationship to society and belonging. I always felt like an outsider as a young person because I moved around a lot. I didn't fit in with the group. I saw things. I had some intuitive understanding of what people were going through without the language to use it, and that was very painful as a sensitive, empathetic child, especially with a family that was really broken. And I've had to go through a shift of the way I thought about my community and create balance through creating harmony with the group rather than saying the group doesn't accept me. Screw the group. You know what I'm saying? Same thing with my resources. I had a lot of shifts of fortune financially as a young person. I had very affluent grandparents that I realized as a teenager gained a lot of that wealth through really not through nefarious means that I didn't agree with philosophically. So I rejected money as a concept for a long period of time. And I've had to come into balance with that and start saying it's not, money isn't evil. It's like, what are you doing to do it? So that's another rebalancing maintenance type of experience. Okay. So think about that with the third decan of Libra is there's probably something that is out of whack that you're going to need to bring into harmony around this period of time from October the 13th to the 23rd, where you already know what it is. Now you just, like, you have to just keep the plates spinning, I guess I would say. You know, you have to keep spinning a plate and then another one's wobbling and you have to go spin that one. There may be multiple things that need your attention, and you have to figure out how to give them the right amount of attention, but mostly it's through your own inner peace. Okay. Looking through the chat, some good comments about the Sandman series. I love that. I love that series. It's really great. Neil Gaiman inspired from the comics. Really good stuff. Let's see. Yeah, Stephen has a part of spirit in the first decan of Libra. So yes, going through a similar experience. Kate says, really striking me how my upbringing mirrors your own experience. I am moved so much. Well, you know, this is the thing, and this is why we share some of our experiences. You don't have to share every single thing. There's some things that are okay to keep private. I think that in my own experience, I share some of my vulnerability in my stories so that people can find recognition in their own story. And I think that when we allow ourselves to be authentic and true and share our pains as well as our successes, it makes it okay for other people to realize that life doesn't have to be this, you know, I don't know, Pinterest board, right? And it isn't. And even the people that present themselves as having the Pinterest board life, it's a mask. It's a facade. Often those people are some of the most toxic, unbalanced people you've ever met in your life. Not to say that there aren't some wonderful people that are doing good work that have a good sense of aesthetics, but it's okay to get a little messy sometimes with life. And I think we learn the most important things from that. All right. So just to wrap up whatever's on the screen here, those two houses are more related to our actions. These two houses down here, the 5 and 6, are more related to fortune that we receive, really through, not always through our own efforts. So you may receive misfortunes through accidents and illnesses that aren't necessarily your fault through the 6th house, and that brings you away from completion. You may receive benefits from your family or from like your kids that you didn't really do anything except pursue some pleasure to create something that benefits you long-term potentially. And we can argue how our experience of parenthood is like, but oftentimes it's a legacy that we're getting. Sometimes Venus can represent good fortune that you just need to learn to receive and be open to receive. Whereas Jupiter in the 11th house is more about the actions that we take that will create honor and merit eventually in the 10th house. Okay. And eventually Saturn in the 12th is going to be in the 1st house, right? So or it's being pulled away from the angle, but there's so many paradoxes in the way we look at a chart. But eventually, maybe after purification, the planet that was in the 12th is available for us to use in a more balanced way. Okay. All right, so let's keep going. So let's talk about this astrology, the details. I'll go through this a little bit quicker. Let me see. We still got people hanging out? Yeah, 33 of you are still here. That's awesome. You all are awesome. I'm so grateful that people want to hang out and that we can connect, and that it's nice to feel heard. And I hope that I help you feel heard by shouting out your comments. And that's part of the reason this broadcast takes as long as it does, because I want to include you in it rather than just talk at you. Okay. So let's talk about October the 13th. So the moon starts out of bounds at the beginning of Libra 3 season. So we've got a Gemini moon here out of bounds. We're probably going to be thinking a lot about, the experiences we just went through with the Mercury opposite Jupiter, with Mars squaring Neptune, with the Sun trining Saturn, etc. So try not to get overly emotional. That goes from the 13th to the 18th. It's important to relax around this period of time. It's important to, not overwhelm yourself with alternatives. I think that's the thing, because the moon is going to hook up with Mars, and that could lead to maybe a mini nervous breakdown. That's the extreme wording of it, but maybe we're just feeling some extra anxiety where it makes it hard to sleep or hard to relax. I think there's an overthinking quality with this that I think if we release the need to know everything right away, we might navigate this out of bounds moon a little bit better. Now, as we get to the 14th, we are going to be experiencing a trine between Venus and Saturn. So look at this. Is really fascinating to me because Venus and the Sun are traveling so close together. They're kind of in tandem right now. This is like the Libra dream, isn't it? Like the Libra Sun has its buddy with him. It's so happy. It's got Venus there. We're going to see aspects from the Sun to other planets, and then Venus immediately making a similar aspect for a period of time. So now Venus is going to be making that harmonious trine to Saturn. So maybe after all of the challenging conversations that we had, we're ready to make a commitment in a relationship or in something that is related to Venus in our chart. So look at Libra and look at where you may be trying to create peace in that area of your life. And then look at also the Taurus house in your chart, because Taurus is being provided resources by Venus, although it isn't witnessing right now. There's a concept called liking girding, where it has kind of a secret way of providing resources for it. So check out those two areas of your life to see what you may be committing to during this period of time. Well, thank you, Kate. Kate is talking about my uniqueness. I appreciate that. This is I try. Doing this is sometimes one of the most humbling things ever. One of the things I hated the most as a young person was being embarrassed. I didn't even want really people to look at me as a young person because I was just embarrassed about things. And now it's just like, here's all my vulnerability. Just try to be kind. It's a very different experience. I guess I'm growing into my Leo North node about visibility and the advantages of being visible, but also utilizing my spotlight for the good of the group and the good of the whole, rather than just a self-serving type of thing. So that's what whoa, what happened? There we go. Sorry. Had some weird thing going on there. All right. So that's October the 14th with a trine between Venus and Saturn. On the 16th, Mercury is going to go back under the beams of the Sun. So you can see here, we have Mercury within 15 degrees of the Sun and getting closer to the Sun. Okay. And it's going under the beams of the Sun at that 8-degree Libra area, which I said earlier was associated with a fixed star called Diadem. And Diadem is a fixed star in Coma Berenices, which is a constellation that is like looks like either a crown or like, in this case, I think the crown is referring to hair. So it looks like a big wig in the sky, like a big sky weave. Big sky weave. Sorry. I'm sorry. So Coma, Berenices, Queen Berenices, cut off her hair and sacrificed it on the altar of Aphrodite for the safe return of her husband from war. And there is probably a sacrifice that we have to renegotiate some kind of familial sacrifice that we are making around this period of time. And there may be some responsibilities that come along with that. But I think it's important to really consider taking an action as Mercury makes its morning set, okay, that is for the good of your community. And I think you'll benefit from that. A lot of the times we wonder, well, if we do this, if we give up our own guided perspective, initiative, willpower thing, are we going to benefit? I think in this case, you probably will do some good if you take everyone's needs into consideration. And it's okay to make the sacrifice for the good of the whole at this period of time. Remember, Mercury is also kind of, it gets a little bit weakened at this point too. So it's probably important to really weigh the advantages and disadvantages of whatever you're going through thoroughly. Carolyn Perkins is here. We met in one of Adam's classes. I love your in-depth analysis. I'm a Libra Sun, Mercury, Neptune. This is great stuff. Well, thank you, Carolyn. Nice to see you. Welcome more Nightlight alumni. This is a great place for Nightlight alumni to hang out. And again, in great gratitude to Adam Ellenboss for his contribution to astrology and just my understanding of it. It's weird kind of going back and forth with his new/old name. I think I'd just gotten used to using his new name or his new Bhakti name. But, it's not that big of a deal as far as like we are concerned. It's a big deal for him, but it's easy. You get used to it. And I think it's important to honor people's journeys and honor what they're comfortable being called, whether it's a birth name or an assumed name or whatever. And I think that's really, you can give someone a lot of grace by just honoring their wishes. Okay, so that's the Mercury going under the beams. The other thing to consider about this under the beams kind of energy, the morning set, is that Mercury is moving a lot faster when it's direct. So we're heading towards what is called the superior conjunction of Mercury, the superior cazimi, right? In the heart of the sun. So when it's direct, it's called the superior conjunction. When it's retrograde, it's called the inferior conjunction. Now, I've been talking to another astrologer named Gary Caton, who is the Mercury expert. And I think, and I'm not 100% clear on this, but I know that he says that when Mercury is under the beams and retrograde, he considers that Mercury being in the underworld. I would assume that when Mercury is under the beams direct, that it is Mercury visiting the gods and visiting Olympus to get some kind of download from spirit. So if you think of it in that way, although there can be an argument made that Mercury at its greatest elongation could be Mercury visiting the gods, but we're splitting hairs, and I don't have a good answer for that. But maybe think about, there may be something from your higher self. Rather than going into the depths of your past, there may be something aspirational about Mercury going under the beams direct and then coming into the heart of the sun. So, and it may move quickly. When Mercury slows down, it's like review, slow down. Here, there might be some new idea. And the cazimi is going to happen in Scorpio. So there may be some new idea related to scorpionic themes that we will see as we get into the next month. Yes, honoring they them identities. I agree, Stephen. Yeah, we try to honor everyone's identities, pronouns, all of those things. I mean, how difficult is it really? Like, I mean, on some level, it's just like, really, just let people be what or who they want to be, and call them what they want to be called. It's no skin off your ass. Like that's what I think about all that. It's kind of like, when people get upset about it, it's like, whatever. It's not about you. Like, do what allows people to feel comfortable being themselves. And then, I don't know. It's gonna say something like more severe for people who aren't accepting, but I think I'll just hold my tongue and hopefully encourage people to be kind to people and accept people where they're at. And again, allow them to change their mind too. All right, so that's Mercury going under the beams of the sun, the morning set, conjoining the fixed star diadem, maybe potentially visiting Olympus. If we get to the 17th, here again we have another lunar phase that is kind of giving us some insight into some of the challenges we might be experiencing. So here is the sun at 24 degrees of Libra and the moon at 24 degrees of Cancer. That is called the last quarter moon. And the last quarter moon, according to Dane Rudyard and Demetra George, who is a disciple of that type of thinking, is sort of like an existential crisis where we might be changing our mind about something. We're trying to consolidate all the wisdom that we've learned from the lunar cycle, and now we're trying to shift and release energy. This is something that's important about the moon. The moon is a manifester, but the moon is also a composter, right? So we gain light and then we release it and disseminate it. So you may be, changing your mind about something. I'm a last quarter moon phase in my natal chart, and I often question the norms of society. I was not someone who fell into line with the expectations. I was like, well, why do we do that? Why are we doing it this way? I don't agree with that. And I'm going to ask those questions. So we may be doing that in our own lives. I think the moon is in a much more powerful position because it's in its own domicile. The moon is in the decan of Cancer that's associated with questions of surplus and scarcity. So in this decan, we may have an awareness of we are rich in one area of life, but that richness takes away from some other area. And as a Mercury native of this decan, it really affected the way that I dealt with resources. I felt a lot of guilt around receiving because I saw that not everyone had the advantages that I did at various times in my youth. And then, also I've experienced scarcity through, I don't know, sometimes you have a generation where you have one generation that has figured it out and then their kids kind of screw it up. That's what happened with my grandparents were had a lot of advantages and wealth and stability for the most part. And then my parents kind of, they screwed it up. I don't know how else to say it. And they cost themselves a lot of money fighting with each other and experienced some scarcity because of that disharmony. And I was the beneficiary of both my grandparents' abundance and my parents' scarcity. So it's a really unique perspective to have on life. Having both periods of privilege and then periods of lack. And I think that this moon is going to be bringing that question to the fore. And it's going to be challenging our sense of equilibrium and balance and peace. So you might be asking yourself, how much is enough? I've already satisfied my physical desires. How do I find meaning now? That's what I think a lot of the Four of Cups card is all about too. It's like, I've already satisfied the desires of the body. Now, where do I find, meaning again, as in the transition from Cancer to Leo, liberate spirit and pursue something that is a worthy spiritual goal rather than just satiating the senses. So that's going to be October the 17th. We also on this day are going to see a trine between the sun and Mars. Whoops. Sometimes I forget to change my little cursor here. So you can see here that we've got a sun Mars trine. So this may be another moment where to restore balance and harmony and equilibrium, like Nemesis, and right proportion, we have to utilize the energy of Mars to eliminate and separate from some idea, some imagined pathway. Gemini expands options, whereas Virgo consolidates them. When Mars is moving through Gemini, we may be aggressively pursuing many different options, but really I think the essence of that energy is sever some options. So to restore balance and peace, you may have to say, this just isn't right for me right now. This is what's important, okay? So again, I will reiterate this for you Gemini folks out there. You can pursue many different things in your life. You can change your mind. It's okay to change your mind. You can pursue something, and then when you've learned what you need to learn from it, you can shift gears and pursue something else. What I will say, when folks with Gemini placements, myself included, start going haywire, is when we try to pursue everything all at once, or when we aren't present with what we're pursuing in the moment because we're already trying to imagine the advantages or disadvantages of something else that we're not actually doing. So here's an example of this. I have Venus in Gemini, square my stellium in Virgo, with Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars in Virgo. When I was a child, my poor Piscean father, who, bless his heart, was a little bit of a pushover. I was a very strong-willed child. I was a Leo rising child, stubborn Taurus moon. I wanted to get my own way, and I was not shy about expressing it. And when we would go shop for shoes or pants, because we didn't have a lot of money, because I didn't have the ability to get shoes all the time, I wanted to get the perfect shoe for me. And I would go and I'd ask my dad to take me to like 6 different stores to look at all the options. I wanted to know every option before I made my choice. I wanted to be well informed. And this manifests now, and I have to read 8 books before I make a decision to what the essence of that is. And it drove myself and my dad crazy, okay? Like to the point where eventually my dad, bless his heart, had to be like, just pick something. And then I would pick something, and then I would get it, and I would instantly regret it. Like, sometimes I would even make him, or he allowed me to return it and get something else. Which, looking back on it, I just tortured my father. And I think that this is some of the energy that we have to be careful of with Mars and Gemini, is that we can just torture ourselves and others by trying to take into account every single option. You know what I've learned as an adult? I can't possibly know every single option. Sometimes I just have to choose. And if it turns out that the choice I made wasn't the most ideal choice, I can make a new choice later. And yes, it's hard because sometimes we have limited resources, but every choice is a learning experience. Every choice is something where you can be present in the moment. And I think that this is the moment where, to restore balance and equilibrium, it's okay, just make one choice. You don't have to explore every single path. There will be times where you can find a new path, but breathe life into the path that is most important to you. Remember, the transition from Gemini is to Cancer. We want to nurture something after exploration. That's really the goal of Gemini, is let's get us to the solstice so we can infuse something into a body, an idea into a body, and nurture it to its full potential over the course of Cancer to Leo. See what I'm saying here? There's a method to the madness. Okay. So gentle with yourself. You don't have to do everything all at once. It's okay to explore a little bit, but then eventually release some of the options. So that's October the 17th. That's the trine from the sun to Mars. When we get to the 18th, and again, remember that these aspects, I've given you specific dates, but these aspects are going to be applying within 3 degrees, and however long that takes to apply. So that Sun-Mars trine is going to be applying for a couple days. You're going to feel that for a couple days beforehand. And you're also going to be feeling a trine between Venus and Mars that's happening simultaneously, because Venus and the Sun are traveling together. Remember, we had a trine between the Sun and Venus and Saturn earlier in the month, and now we're going to have the trine between the Sun and Venus and Mars later in the month. So again, to create harmony, we may have to cut or sever some of the choices. So again, themes are similar, but they might be related to multiple areas of your life, the Leo areas and the Taurus and the Libra areas, because those planets are providing resources for those areas of your life. Steven says, I drove my poor Libra dad crazy. This Pisces with Mars and Aries, Sag Moon trine. Yes. Yeah, it's hard to realize that in the moment, all of us probably drove our parents crazy on some level. And my daughter drove me crazy, and I got a lot of the karma came back around. My dad used to, my dad really used to torture me with, like, just wait till you have kids. that line, right? Oh boy. And did it ever. And I love my daughter, but it definitely, what went around came around. Urania, Portia says, I have these dynamics too, but no Gemini or Virgo placements. So I'm wondering where that's coming from. Maybe Mercury in Capricorn. Yeah. And I wonder, Urania, Portia, if it's first deck in Capricorn. Because if it is, you're doing the Two of Pentacles energy with the juggling and the weighing of two different possibilities. So maybe you can confirm or deny that. I don't remember specifically off the top of my head where it is in your chart, but that's one potential possibility. Okay, so that's the 18th. And while this is happening, we have the Sun making and applying trine applying square to Pluto. Wow, even more viewers. That's awesome that you all are hanging out and sticking around. I'm constantly in awe of that and grateful. This is a great time to just take a little break and say, if you are enjoying this content, you can do me a huge favor by hitting the like button on this video, or subscribing to the channel, or the newsletter. That's how you can find out when I'm going to be going live again, which is roughly once a week, or when I have offerings like new classes or webinars. If you'd like to make a material donation to the work I'm doing today, buy me some more shakes to keep my blood sugar high, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com, or do a little super chat or super sticker in the chat today. So thank you for all of that. Okay, so as we were experiencing the Sun and Venus trining Mars, we also have the Sun and then subsequently Venus. Okay, see the theme here? We're going to see this happening over and over again, where the Sun's going to bring awareness to something, and then we're going to have to harmonize it. That's a great way to think about this. So the Sun is something that brings clarity and shines light. When it hits something, it's bringing our awareness, our vision, right? It is light. It is literal light. So we're every time the Sun is hitting one of these planets, it's bringing an awareness of a dynamic between them. So on the 19th and leading up to the 19th, we will have an awareness of potentially some power struggles that we're going to be going through, unfortunately. Whenever the Sun and Pluto make a difficult aspect with one another, bar none, there's power struggle. Okay, we think of the Sun as authority and authority figures. We think of Pluto as things that were buried, corruption that needs to be unearthed and transformed and dealt with. So there may be something in your life that's throwing you off of your balance, and it may be corruption of a system. I look at Pluto and Capricorn as systemic corruption. It is more about like the government or the DMV or something like that, where there's probably something that you're going through around this period of time where you have an awareness of a system that isn't, working properly in your life, and you're going to have to go through some stuff to harmonize it eventually with Venus making that square. Maybe there's a relationship that is going through some changes. I'm thinking about like going back to my earlier story about student loans. Maybe some corruption is revealed about, people barking about, well, why does one person get their student loan forgiven and these other people aren't? And maybe there's enough of that to like help them to backtrack, and change the story. I hope for everyone's sake that the most people, more people, not less, get relief from crippling student loan debt. Because again, I think it's very predatory the way that we put young people into bondage without proper financial education built into the system. But I'm not going to dwell on that though. So awareness of some kind of power struggle, and then Venus having to kind of work through it. So be very careful about not falling prey to manipulation in your relationships, to maybe not lashing out against your systems as well. There may be some frustration around this period of time with our governments and with our leaders, and that's understandable. And sometimes we do have to hold those leaders accountable. We have some really corrupt leadership that's going on over in Europe right now, and we're seeing the devastation that can cause. There's also some newly elected authoritarian leadership in Italy, which is a little bit unsettling. There's a real rise of authoritarianism in the world right now, and it's something that we should probably pay attention to so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And I'm speaking specifically to things like World War II, where we saw rise of authoritarian fascist regimes and the pain and suffering that caused. And I think that we're still in a moment where we might be able to shift the outcomes if we really pay attention and stop it in its tracks before it gains too much of a foothold. I just keep praying for that. And I hope that for all of you across different parts of the world, that I pray for your freedom and sovereignty as well. So that's the events of the squares between Pluto and the Sun and Mercury. I'm sorry, Sun and Venus. So this is leading us to a beautiful Venus cazimi on the 22nd of October. So I think that whatever is exposed, and something will indefinitely probably be exposed, some corrupted power system, there is a beautiful solution potentially coming after. This is a really powerful cazimi for Venus because it's happening in Libra. It's happening in her home sign. I believe that there was cazimis that were happening earlier in Scorpio for the past few years. And correct me if I'm wrong. This is just something off the top of my head, but this might be a really beautiful moment for peace and for reestablishing harmony and peace after the exposure of corruption or some kind of really difficult negotiation or power struggle. So I'm looking forward to this. Although I will say, instantaneously after this Venus cazimi in the heart of the Sun, Venus will immediately go into her exile in Scorpio. The Sun will gain dignity in Scorpio. I don't know if it gains dignity, but it loses detriment, right? It loses fall. Debility is what I meant to say. It loses a debility and is sort of in a more quote unquote neutral space. Now, it's not totally neutral because it's moving from a domicile of a benefic to one of a malefic. And that malefic is not super happy right now. When this shift happens, and here I'll show you the shift. It's going to happen on the 23rd. This 23rd of October is a big day. So you could see instantly we have both Venus and the Sun moving into Scorpio. So Venus is losing dignity. And the host is now not a really beautiful, juiced up Venus, but a stationing Mars that is about to go out of bounds, or literally is going out of bounds as we enter Scorpio season. So, yeah, and Stephen's pointing out that the Venus Cazimi is at a critical degree. I have some faith in that Cazimi, but it may be short-lived. There's going to be other problems that come up, okay? Yeah, and Kate says, the alignment reminds me of devastating beauty, the humbling kind. Yes, I agree. I'm trying to stay centered and balanced and hopeful. We're at a real crossroads as a species right now. There is a lot of stuff that we shouldn't ignore with our climate, with our socioeconomic situation, with our the way that we get along with one another as countries and how we're going to treat one another. We're at a really intense crossroads right now. And I think that it's super important for all of us to try to contribute to the world that we would love to see, rather than fall prey to the forces that would want us to fall into fear and despair. A little bit of sobriety is important, and we don't want to ignore the problems, but we also have to be very conscientious of not contributing to the problems through fear-mongering or things of that nature, or just creating divisiveness. This is a time that humanity really actually needs to bind together for the survival, long-term survival of the species. And unfortunately, it feels very divisive right now. And I hope that we can figure it out. I really do. So yeah, shine your light into the world. Be the change you want to see. Super important. For those of you who are interested, and this is sort of just my own vanity, but I have a song that I wrote about Gandhi. It was called Gandhi's Blues. And I took a bunch of Gandhi quotes and put them into song, and you can find it on my SoundCloud, Spencer Michaud Music. It was just a rough demo that I did. But it was, it was a really, there's a lot of wisdom that came out of the way that he expressed himself. And there definitely, he was not a perfect person. He had some problematic things in his life and actions. But overall, I think that there's a lot of wisdom in not letting people dirty your mind with their dirty feet. There's something, a quote about that, about don't let them walk through your mind with their dirty feet. And I think that that's really an important thing to consider as we move into this time period. Kate says, this looks like preparation. Sun going into Scorpio with Venus. It's weird, like God's hand, because luminaries are both with Venus. Yeah. It's prepping us for the eclipse. I mean, we're heading into eclipse season as we head into Scorpio here. So we're going to start feeling, this is a balsamic moon phase that we're looking at on October the 23rd. We're tying up loose ends for a very interesting new start. So let's kind of break that down. So on the 22nd, there's also that Mercury trine Saturn that we missed the day before. So that's another aspect where we're getting some negotiations. So sober negotiations are happening as well. But on the 23rd, we have the Sun and Venus moving into Scorpio, and we have Saturn turning direct. In addition, Mars is getting ready to slow down. It's not retrograde yet, but it's slowing way down to station. So again, I talked earlier about Mars handing over, energy to Saturn, where we're really going to have to consider the long-term communal ramifications of our actions, and our own personal desires may be subjugated to the needs of the collective. And I know how that's really hard for a lot of people. I don't think that there's any shame in that. I think that we do have to be careful that we're not subjugating all of our freedom on some level. Although a lot of people are going to disagree with me about what freedom actually means. Freedom does not mean that you get to do whatever you want whenever you want to do it. I think that's the biggest sham that I've heard a lot of people, especially in my own country, start to put out there. I think that when you're exerting of your will hurts other people, that's not freedom. That's abuse. So sorry to feel so severe about it, but I think that with Saturn turning direct, there's going to be more need to put our own personal desires aside and do what is good for the collective. So, and it may feel like you can't do whatever you want. Well, too bad. That's Saturn. Sorry. It's just grow up. That's what Saturn is saying. You know who tries to get what they want all the time? A fucking toddler. And they learn over time that they can't just, do whatever they want whenever they want to do it. There's limits and boundaries that are important for growing into a mature individual, right? And that's what Saturn's going to be saying here, is that something is going to need to change for us to keep the fabric of society functional. I think this is what Saturn in Aquarius is doing, is saying, yeah, like Rachel's saying, care for your community. So yeah, collective psychological life support, Kate says. 100%. I think that we're in a time that is, all of the, kind of things that people talk about with the Aquarian age, which I don't actually believe in. I think that we are in the air age. If you want to add something to that, we are in the Saturn Jupiter coming together in Aquarius type of age, but I think it's very different than what people thought about with the quote unquote Aquarian age. It's not just like peace, love, harmony, brotherhood. It's, hey, there's some really difficult compromises that you're going to have to make for the good of the collective and the species as a whole. And we are so polarized right now about our individual desires versus what needs to happen for the good of the whole. And I just pray, I really pray that we can put some of our individual challenges aside and come together for just the good of the planet. You know what I'm saying? Like all this like saber rattling really upsets me, because ultimately, do you know who loses if somebody pulls the trigger on any of that? Everybody loses. Nobody wins. And just sit with that for a second. Everybody loses. So in your own life, if you have a situation where you're so polarized that you're ready to blow up your whole life, who wins in that? Nobody. And you may have to do something really hard and really difficult to create the best possible outcome for everyone in your life. And I really think this is a pivotal moment for something of that nature. And that being said, let's talk a little bit about Scorpio 1. So when we get to, again, Mars is out of bounds now, right? I think this is another thing to consider. This Mars is spicy, all right? This is something where you're going to feel your anger, your righteous indignation. You're going to want to lash out with your words. Mars is not going to follow the normal rules. I'm a little bit nervous about this period of time because an out of bounds Mars feels to me like an escalation of violence. And we already have enough violence right now. And I think this is going to be a tense time, unfortunately. Now, that doesn't mean that it's like the end of the world or anything like that. And, to be honest, even if it was, would we know the difference? I mean, that's kind of my thought now. It's like, even if the world blew up tomorrow, like, then what? Then maybe we're on to the next experience or something, right? Anyway, that's not what anybody wants. I'm not advocating for that. I'm hoping that we can be mature with our Mars during this period of time. There will be choices that need to be made. There will be difficult choices. There will be reviews of conflicts that we've already made a decision about. Okay. There will be I think that Saturn is going to say, you know what? It's time to really Saturn up. It's time not to throw temper tantrums about idealism. It's time to just unify as best you can for the good of everyone so we can all make it through this as best we can. Because whether we like it or not, we're facing some really tough times with climate change. We're facing some tough times with food security, with water cleanliness, with weather that has become more and more extreme. And, when a disaster hits, what do you rely on? You rely on your community to get you through it. You're not going to be able to just individual your way out of a hurricane. It just doesn't work that way. You're not going to be able to individuate your way out of a flood where you need to be rescued by somebody in a boat. It's not realistic. Okay. So lean on your community, create your community, reach out to your community. Okay. Now, in true Libra fashion, let me just give the counterbalance to that. There are certain times where we do need to protect certain individual rights, and that's important too. And we're going through that as a world community as well. So that's why we have the discussions. That's why we have the hopefully peaceful debate rather than an argument. There's a way to have debate that is fruitful rather than destructive. And I hope that we can do that as much as possible. Let's see. Yeah, Carolyn, the world is at a real tipping point right now. And I think it's really irresponsible not to talk about it. I'm someone who used to get really overwhelmed by the collective, and sometimes I would have to just focus on my personal to not get overwhelmed by world events. But I do think it is important that we try to take good care of ourselves, put out positivity into the world, but also acknowledge that we're heading into a difficult time, which is sometimes just the reality. And these are, I'll say, one of the most cliched but beautiful quotes, right, from the Lord of the Rings. We don't always get to choose the time that we are born into. We get to choose what we do with it. And we can bemoan the choices of our ancestors that got us to this point, but that honestly doesn't matter anymore. It matters what you do about it now. And that's what Gandalf was trying to tell, Frodo when he had to take the ring to Mordor. We're having to take a ring to Mordor. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. We can't just sit in the Shire and smell flowers and drink mead. We got to do the tough journey to get us back to balance and back to equilibrium. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Scorpio 1 and this eclipse that we're going to be experiencing on the 25th. So here is October the 25th. And you can see there's a new moon solar eclipse at 2 degrees of Scorpio. Sorry, I'm just getting everything worked out here. Clicking everything. So you can see this is October 25th. This is 6:48 a.m. Eastern time. And we have our new moon solar eclipse. And we have two major players in this eclipse. Venus is conjoining the sun still. It's still pretty close to the sun, but it's in its exile. And Mars is the host, and it's stationing retrograde within 5 days afterwards. This new moon lunar eclipse is also conjoined the South Node, aka K2. I've been telling clients that I think of this eclipse as the beginning, which new moons are, of an ending, which is what I relate to the South Node. And also Scorpio is a time of release and compost. The card associated with this eclipse is the Five of Cups. And the Five of Cups shows a figure in mourning. And this decan is really about, I call it ritualized mourning. So you can see the figure is cloaked in black. There's 3 spilled cups and there's 2 still standing behind him. I do think that leading up to this period, we are going to see something that we were attached to that we are going to lose. I don't know if that's collectively or individually. It may be both, depending on where this eclipse falls in your chart. It probably will be sad. It probably will be difficult. And it may, cause a lot of reevaluation of certain things in our life. But there is some secret silver lining in this card. I think that it's I think that there is a need. First of all, you don't want to spiritually bypass your pain. The key with this decan is acknowledging your suffering and your pain. I think that you have to do that. This is a great eclipse to just ugly cry and mourn the loss of something that you were attached to. Okay. Sometimes it's our desires. The Scorpio, to me, Scorpio, Mars's job in Scorpio in general, is fighting and defending against the dying of the light. It's like something is dying and needs to die and needs to be released. But Scorpio is saying, I'm going to defend this dying life force with every inch of my being. Okay. Now, that can cause a lot of pain and suffering and heartache. I think that a more graceful way of dealing with Scorpio energy is, instead of defending against the dying of the light, is, I don't know, I could see both sides. There's some situations where it is important to fight and it is important to defend your territory and your what you were attached to. But for the most part, if you look at the transition between Scorpio and Sagittarius, by allowing what needs to be released, you liberate energy, spiritual energy, to find a new outlet and a new goal, like Jupiter and Sagittarius. Okay. So think about that. Examine during this eclipse, where are my own personal desires? Because there's a daimon with this decan called the Nymphi. Austin Coppock calls this decan a jawbone. T. Susan Chang calls it a storm of tears. It's a double Mars-ruled face. It's one of the most martial places in the entire zodiac. So Mars severs and separates. Book T calls it loss and pleasure. Book of Thoth calls it disappointment. Now the Nymphi, the desire part comes from the Nymphi, who are objects of desire. And I think that when we examine the things that aren't healthy for us, that can lead to some really positive changes. I think that we're going to be examining things that just aren't working for us anymore at this eclipse. And how do we learn how to release, right? Yes, Alley Cat says, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Yes, there may be some situations where that is appropriate. And that is a beautiful line. What's that, Langston Hughes, right? Maybe I'm misquoting, but I think that there's some situations where it is important to hang on. There's others where all we're doing is creating corruption. This decan, we have a realization of those things that may be passing out of our lives. In the second decan, we get nostalgic for the past, okay, with the Six of Cups card. And we come back together with something to maybe glean its essence in like a setting sun type of moment, but then to move on. Dylan Thomas, thank you, sorry. And then in the third decan, if we're still hanging on, that card's called debauchery. And that's where we're like the necromancer, where we're so enamored with the old form that isn't vital anymore, that we're creating all sorts of addictions and challenges to try to keep something alive that no longer wants to live anymore, that needs to be liberated. So if you realize that in the beginning of Scorpio season, there is a way to accept the things that are passing out of your life and to maybe even not hasten them, but just allow it to happen. A gardener needs to compost the old forms from the previous season to create fertility for the future. Okay? That doesn't mean that we're like only dreaming about the future fertility. Sometimes you just have to, turn the compost pit and let the things heat up and be present in the moment. And this moment, maybe we're turning the pit and we're just in the smelly compost pit and we're just, mourning the loss of our beautiful tomatoes that some of them rotted on the vine. And isn't it a shame that we didn't get to eat those or we didn't pick them on time? But if you try to eat those, you'll make yourself sick. So the best thing that you can do is throw that tomato in the compost pit with the knowledge that that rotten tomato will provide sustenance the next season. And isn't that beautiful, coming into alignment with that cycle? That's the way to do this gracefully, in my opinion. I think this is going to be a hard eclipse. The moon is in its fall, right? The moon's in its fall. I said exile last week in regards to a Scorpio moon, but I was thinking of Venus. The moon's in its fall. It's a really tough place for physicality, right? It's also conjoined a fixed star called Mia Placidus, which is in the constellation the Argo. So there may be a journey that we're going on that is necessitated. And the Argo and Jason and the Argonauts, they went on that journey to go find the golden fleece. You may have to become an explorer. You may have to step into the unknown. You may have to get uncomfortable, not know, or you may have to accept some things that you don't know the answers to. When you release something, you don't always exactly know what you're going to plant next year. You don't know what harvest you're going to have. You don't know what the weather conditions are going to be like, but you still compost because, that's where the faith comes in. So that may be the energy, I think, of this eclipse, is willingly letting something go and giving it its proper due, and then turning towards gratitude for what is still supporting you in your life with these two cups that are still standing. Okay, so that's the eclipse. We're rounding the bend here. We're almost done. Hopefully everyone's doing good out there. I'm kind of fading a little bit, but we'll get through to the end here. We're almost there. On the 26th, well, Mercury making a trine to Mars. Okay, so here's Mercury now in that third decan of Libra, creating a situation where we're asking ourselves questions about what could create harmony, asking ourselves questions on how to rebalance our energy. I always look at Mercury to say, where should we be asking good questions, not where we should be making definitive statements, right? Okay, it's important to do that. Oh no. No, Tiffy's call. Tiffy says, sorry, Spencer, but no rotten or sick molded things in the compost. You may get phytophthora in your soul. Okay. So here, there's a lesson in that too, right? Maybe we don't need to hang on to that rotten tomato at all. Maybe we just need to return it to the earth and not have any expectations about future fertility regarding with it. I like that shift, right? Maybe we only compost, we only save something that will lead to future fertility. But if we have something that is just, unretrievable, irreconcilable, then we just let the earth have it. And we don't want to eat it anymore, right? Like this, I'm speaking metaphorically too. It's okay that there's a situation that might not be salvageable, and truly releasing it will liberate you for whatever the next cycle is in your life. Okay. Yeah, so Mercury is where we ask questions, and you may be asking questions how to restore equilibrium and what needs to be let go of at this time. Okay. Now, when we get to the 27th, the moon is out of bounds again, right? So the moon is out of bounds from the 27th of October till the 1st of November. And here on the 27th, It's the same energy that we had before, where both the sun and Venus went through this cycle, and now Venus is going through the same cycle. It goes through a trine to Mars. I mean, here's a story that's happening for each of these planets. Trine Saturn, then it trines Mars, then it squares Pluto. So here is the point in the time where we've gone from this trine to Mars to the square to Pluto. So again, we may be questioning authority. We may be questioning how we bring balance to positions of power. We may be exposing corruption and arguing with corrupt entities at this point, or something of that nature. So again, it's a similar story that each of those planets is going through. Alley Cat says, is it a good time to start something new though? As much as I want it, I'm not sure today is the day. I pulled a card on it and got 3 of Swords reversed. We're always starting something. But again, it's the beginning of letting go. It's the beginning of an ending. So if you're going to say, am I going to build something that's going to be about promoting physical growth during this period of time? Nope. But are you starting a process of grieving or letting go or composting an old form in your life? Yes. So that's why these South Node eclipses are weird, especially the Scorpio ones, because there's this paradoxical energy of something new, but also, releasing something at the same time. There's all sorts of things where you could do, hey, this is the beginning of the end, right? I'm sure most of you have experienced that, where you knew, hey, well, this is initiating a letting go process. Maybe it's a note in the mail about something, or maybe a diagnosis of some sort, and you knew it was the beginning of a deterioration or something. We've all gone through those experiences. So, yeah, Mercury is going to be going through that journey that I've been describing. And then on the 28th, we have another solar phase. We have Jupiter is retrograding, or actually an ingress, is retrograding back into Pisces. So here we can see now, Jupiter's back in its own domicile, back to be applying to Neptune. We may be really reevaluating the dream and what we're willing to sacrifice for it. Okay, so really pay attention to your why around this period. All of these events are going to be really encouraging us to get in touch with our spiritual purpose, okay, with our why. That's not always true with every aspect, I think. I mean, we can spiritualize everything, but at the same time, sometimes there's certain aspects that are this is really about getting down to your practical brass tacks. Well, when Jupiter retrogrades into Pisces, there's going to be a focus on, maybe your sense of grief and loss helps you to reevaluate why you're doing something and what your source of meaning is in life. That's often when we find the greatest insights, is when we're at our lowest points. When we lose something, it really does cause us to ask questions about why we're doing what we're doing. And I think this could be a moment with Jupiter retrograding into Pisces. Kate says it's okay to take time and grieve. You don't always have to know what to do. I agree. Alley Cat says, I love that you seem to almost always have a really insightful take on things. Well, thank you, Alley Cat. I try. And if I don't have an insightful thing on something, I hope that I'm self-aware enough to admit it and be like, you know what? I don't know. I'll think about that. I think that's the best way to be in this position where you're sort of an advice giver, is if you really do have a thought on something, then give it. But if you don't, it's okay to say that you don't have a good, it's good advice. Sometimes we just have to be with something too. So thank you, Allie. Susanna says, I'm sorry the Sandman has arrived for me. Oh, okay. Thank you for being here, Susanna. I appreciate you. And get some good rest. I know we're going late. I'm probably speaking a lot of you to sleep in Europe here. So I hope that I've, wistfully transited you into sleep and dreamland with my peaceful, melodious tones and my expensive, microphone. Oh boy. Well, sweet dreams, friends. So let's wrap this up. We got two more little things to discuss, and then we'll be done for the day. On the 29th, Mercury is going to move into Scorpio to join, you can see here, to join Libra, or I'm sorry, to join the Sun and Venus, okay, on the 29th and the 30th here. So again, the questions we'll be asking about, it be less about how to create balance and more about what do we need to let go of? What do we need to defend? And what do we need to release? Okay. And then the big news of the month is that our friend Mars, who is now hosting all of these planets, Mercury, the Sun, and Venus, is going to turn retrograde. And there it is, October the 30th, 9:25 a.m. Eastern time. Now, remember, Mars is also out of bounds, so not really acting on its best behavior already. And now it's going to be, going retrograde, which also can tend to weaken its expression or destabilize it on some level. Okay. So it is providing the clay for all these Scorpio planets. Now I will also admit that it does not witness those planets by a whole sign aspect. So there's going to be some difficulty for those planets receiving energy from Mars. I would say that probably Jupiter is trying to help by a whole sign trine, and Saturn is also providing significations by a whole sign square. This retrograde is going to last from October the 30th to January the 12th, 2023, where it stations direct at 8 degrees of Gemini. And eventually Mars will move into its fall in Cancer on the 25th of March, 2023. So we've got a long way to go in this Mars Gemini energy. And honestly, if you want to get my full rundown, long, like 2-hour thoughts on this, I did a podcast with Melissa Lafara and Shu Yap on the Energetic Principles podcast. So I would really recommend listening to that for the full range of my thoughts. And it's Shu had some good insights. Mel Lafara had some good insights. That would be the way to really get in depth in that. But I think just briefly, again, I've been hinting at all of the themes with this. There may be some kind of ultimatum or black and white situation where we are going to be reevaluating the choice that we made. There may be some kind of metaphorical execution that we made that we may have to backtrack off of. Some opinion, some declarative statement. We're really trying to get clear about what stays and what goes, and we may have to really review it for this period of time. I think that it is going to destabilize Mars a little bit. You may feel a little cranky. You may be popping off with your words a little bit more. So it's really important to think twice before you speak. It's really important to try to use your words to create clarity and ask questions rather than to create division and divisiveness. I will also say that this is the time where we're going to be really elections are going to be heating up in America, midterm elections. And every election in America now is like life or death stakes anymore. Like, is our democracy going to survive after this election? It's frustrating and a little bit unsettling. And I think everybody's going to be trying to sway people to their side, and they're going to be saying all sorts of mess about the people that they don't like. And I would encourage you maybe to be above the fray. Tap into your inner Saturn. Embrace the things that you believe in while coming from a place of love rather than a place of hate. I had an uncle who in 2016 was really, he was very much in favor of our former president, and I was not. And I wanted to talk to him before that election to understand his viewpoint. And he started on his rant that people often do that are supporters of this individual. And at the end of the conversation, I just asked him, I was like, man, I understand some of your concerns, but also it sounds like you're coming from a place of anger and hate. And I just encourage you to, whatever you choose, just come from a place of love and unity. And his response to that was, fuck you. And he hung up on me, and I haven't talked to him since. I've tried to call and leave messages and tell him that I love him and that I still accept him. But he's chosen not to be a part of my life anymore. And that's really unfortunate. And that was literally the last thing I said to him and the last thing that he said to me. And I think that there's potential for that kind of experience, unfortunately, right now. And I hope that all of you will come from a place of your higher self and trying to do what is best, but also understanding another person's perspective. And again, don't fall prey to the rhetoric and fear and slander like Kate is talking about in the thing. I think that that's going to be really amplified during this period of time. And you may have to kind of step away from it every once in a while and find out how to create your sense of peace. Doesn't mean you should ignore some of the things that are happening, because there's really important things happening. I do think I would encourage you, if you live in America, go vote. Maybe even vote early if you can. Okay, I'm permanently voting early, and I love it. I love absentee balloting. And just go vote. You know, if you want to spread messages of peace and love, go do that. But the rhetoric and the slander and all of that, it's just toxic. And you don't have to, participate in it exclusively or at all. And fight for the underdog, fight for the people that need you, but do it from a place of wanting to be peaceful and to bring unity rather than dividing. And that's my plea to you for this period of time, because I think that the Mars retrograde is going to, a lot of the themes, especially in America, are going to get spicy around that. But all over the world, there's probably rhetoric that's happening in Europe or Asia or wherever other listeners are. And try not to fall prey to the people that want to divide us. And because I want you to consider this, the people that are most divisive are really trying to manipulate the most disadvantaged people in the world. And they're trying to do it because they're trying to trick you into overlooking their abuses of power. And what they want the most of all is the people that aren't in power to be fighting with each other, because then that allows them to do all sorts of nefarious things while people are looking the other way, fighting with one another. The most powerful that you can be is when you band together as a community and not allow anybody who is trying to consolidate authoritarian power to turn you against your brothers and your sisters and your community, your aunts and your uncles, your family, your country people, your world people. That's how you can be most powerful throughout this. Is there's going to be people that will try to tap into your fear and try to tap into your sense of scarcity, especially as we deal with the ramifications of past actions when it comes to consolidating wealth, abusing our resources and the earth. There's going to be really difficult challenges that will require us to come together. And when we allow people to divide us and point fingers and projections, that's when we really are, everyone's going to lose. And this is something I talked about on the podcast with Shu and with Mel. Gemini tends to, especially Mars and Gemini, project our own shadow onto another. And what we have to do is integrate that shadow and accept it and be able to, integrate it. I think I already said that. Like, it's one of the things where we have to, accept it and reunify those two split parts of ourselves. So if you're feeling about like really angry and pointing a finger, it's an important time to take a look in the mirror and figure out what about that is really making, that you might not like about yourself, or that you might, that you need to deal with in your own life and your own challenges. Because it's so easy to demonize whatever the other is, whether it's another political party, whether it's another, an immigrant or someone that's not part of your community, whether it's an opposite sex or an opposite lifestyle. All of those things are ways that we create an externalized shadow. So do your good Jungian work and integrate the shadow so that you are a whole person once again, and that we all can be a whole community once again. So that is what I have for the astrology of October. I'm going to end this today with an animal and a hexagram, like I normally do. The hexagram that I got was number 27, no changing lines. And it translates to nourishment, the jaws, like the mouth. It looks like a mouth, like an open mouth, the hexagram does, with a solid line on top and bottom and open lines in the middle. Other translations are bulging cheeks, nourishing others and being nourished. You are what you eat, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Be careful about what you take in. I think that there's a balance with, especially with political season. I'm not a huge fan of like being glued to the news during political season, with the caveat, and I will say this, that there's, like I said, there's a balanced thing. You don't want to put your head in the sand and ignore what's going on, especially if there's people that are underdogs or underserved communities that are being abused. That is important. It is a privilege to be able to ignore the news. Okay? If you're in a position to be able to ignore like all of this stuff, I mean, God bless you, but you got to go to battle for the people that don't have that luxury. That being said, pace yourself. You don't have to be, inundated with all of this noise all the time. Okay? Be careful of what you take in. Ask questions. Try to get multiple perspectives. Don't get lost in the echo chambers that happen around these period of times. Take proper care of your body, mind, and soul. Be careful what you're taking in, but also be careful what you're putting out. How are you nourishing others? Are you nourishing them with poison and hate and getting angry at whoever and whatever? Or are you giving a vision of hope? This is why, say what you will about him, but this is why one of our previous presidents, Barack Obama, had a successful campaign, because he focused on hope. And I think that we can still do that. I long for those days where politicians were giving us hope instead of giving us a mouthful of fear. And I hope that we can, as a community, demand that that our leaders give us a vision of what we hope for, rather than just manipulating us into avoiding what we would fear the most. So I think that nourishment is really important, that you have to consider as an individual how you're going to do that. I like this hexagram. Yeah. Alley Cat says 27 is very auspicious. It is. I think that as long as we regulate what we take in and what we put out, especially, we are either going to be choosing to contribute to the peace and harmony and unity of the world, or we're going to be contributing to the divisiveness of it. And you have that choice. That's where you reclaim your power. If you're feeling disempowered, disenfranchised right now, and many of us are, with good reason, you get to choose your expression in the world and what you are going to create. Just as I'm choosing today to speak my opinion about choosing peace, you get to choose how you put your energy out into the world too. I could sit here for 3 hours and be on a soapbox and complain, and I do a little bit just to be a little sober about things, but I try to be balanced with how do we take that righteous indignation and do something good with it, right? Good, not divisive. The animal that I got for all of you today is one that I get quite a bit on this broadcast. It was the jellyfish. And the jellyfish speaks to going with the flow. Stop forcing things. Venus is all about receiving the good in the world, if we only open up to it and appreciate it. So gratitude, opening up to receiving joy. Shine your bioluminescence. Jellyfish is a great one for Aphrodite, because Aphrodite emerged from the ocean and she glowed. And then she was adorned by all of the spirits, right? Oh geez, what are they called? The name is escaping me right now, but the little sprites, the little cherubs, were adorning her. But they didn't adorn her for any other reason than just her shining her bioluminescent light. So you don't have to like earn people's good fortune or respect. Just be yourself, right? Shine your light. Jellyfish is great at rebirth as well. If part of it is cut off, it will be able to regenerate itself. So there may be a time where you need to start over, and that might be something with this eclipse. You may have an area of your life where something is going out of your life and you have to start over. So stay calm. Try to find your balance again. Get back to the basics. Try to keep things simple. If you overcomplicate something, that can lead to some suffering. Just be careful with your words. Your words can sting. See, jellyfish have stingers. So Mars and Gemini retrograde, words can be really stinging and divisive. Try to relax, release stress. Acceptance is the key. And I'll give you the serenity prayer. This is, God or divine, give us the ability to accept the things that we cannot change, because there's plenty of those. To change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's going to be important moving forward through October. All right, friends. That's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for 3 hours. You all are amazing, wonderful people. Again, if you are still here and listening to it after the fact, leave me a comment. Let me know how this experience in October is going for you. Please hit the like button for me to get this out in the algorithm to more people. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and to the newsletter. Libra deck in sale. You can learn more about Libra if you want to. There's 20% off on the store on my website. And thank you so much for all of you being here today. All sorts of great comments and contributions and questions. You all are a very kind audience, and I hope that we've cultivated an environment of kindness and a safe sanctuary here. And I hope that you take the time that we have together, and it helps you to shine that out into the world. So that's what I've got. As always, friends, be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, take care of yourself, and I'll see you the next time. Peace, friends.